Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home, wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT, home, safe home.
We're back in better than ever. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and away we go to begin a new week and a sports day that even under normal circumstances would have been extraordinary. Dwayne Wade is a free agent. Carmelo Anthony traded over the weekend, and a fury of fabulous finishes to the early games, the best we've seen in maybe 2 years. But, of course, these are not normal circumstances, and you don't need us to explain to you the reasons why. Golic, here's where I want to start today. We have so much that we will do this morning. Let's start by taking people inside places they normally cannot go, and that would be inside NFL locker rooms, beginning on Friday night into Saturday and right up until all the kickoffs of yesterday. You spent 9 years of your life in there, and those are places where even those of us who have spent our lives on the outside understand that you go in separately and you come out together. You come out right with a unified purpose. And these, of course, extraordinary circumstances. So I'd love you to share, if you could, whatever insight you may have, or even if you're only imagining, if this sort of thing had happened when you were playing, what do you imagine the conversations were like amongst those players as they prepared to go out there and do whatever each of them did during the national anthems this weekend?
It's a great question. Because now I have to go to my 25-year-old self and not my 54-year-old self. So in starting out a couple of years with the Oilers, most of my career with the Philadelphia Eagles, and then 1 year with Miami. Let me go to Philly, because that's where I was the most. And that's where I had the most relationship with the players in that locker room. There's no doubt I would have not knelt. There's no doubt I would have stood. I mean, that's the way I was raised. We were raised remember, my father was a Marine. My father-in-law was a Marine. So I would have stood, and I stood for all the time for national anthems, and that's the way I was raised by my parents, to honor the flag and what it means and the country you live in from an early age on up. And I tried to do the same to my kids. So I don't think there's any way I would have knelt or sat down. Now, that being said, and so then let's take it to the next step of now players want to kneel down or sit to protest. Now we get into a dicey area, because I would have liked to have felt I would have understood. But you're 25, you're a professional athlete, you think you know it all, you think you're this rough, tough guy, and you're not wrong about anything, and you're a little more bullheaded at 25. So that's where it gets difficult. Would I have understood that? Would I have said, no, you're disrespecting the flag? And then I think of the locker room and the heavy personalities we had in that locker room. No, I don't know what Seth Joyner, we could find out and ask him, what Seth Joyner would have done. Unfortunately, we can't with a guy like Jerome Brown, God rest his soul. Jerome Brown and Clyde Simmons, Reggie White. So many guys in that locker room. What would they have done in this instance? And then how would I have dealt with it if they wanted to kneel? And then how would it have been dealt with inside that locker room of those that disagreed vehemently? Of, I'm not standing, well, I'm not sitting, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, of what you could have talked out to show what may not go into the locker room, but then to show a unified front. So I would like to believe, because the one thing that I had that they don't have now, this was before free agency, so I was with that team for a while. I was as good of friends with those guys. I was better friends with them than teammates. We were great teammates, but we were friends with a lot of those guys I just mentioned. And the guys that are still with us today, I'm still friends with. So I would have liked to have believed at my 25, 26, 27-year-old self, I could have listened to what they were saying and why they were doing it. And then I would like to believe I would have been like Chris Long and said, okay, I'm not kneeling, but I'll support you. If you kneel or you sit, I'll have my hand on your shoulder pad, because we're a team, we're a family. You're my friends, not just my teammates. And then let's throw this in. And my son Mike talked about it this morning on First and Last. He's been obviously in locker rooms his whole life as well. And a locker room is your family, and then there's your family as well. And this is now what got thrown in. We can mock each other. We have that fun little text going on, right?
Yes.
Our DraftKings where it's a lot of fun beating up on one another. Somebody from the outside jumped in and started ripping on you or somebody else in that. What would we all do?
Yeah,
we would all pounce.
Circle the wagon.
We'd all pounce. So we can bicker amongst ourselves, but then somebody came in from the outside, and the guy who came in was the highest office, the president, and just dissed on the NFL, dissed on the players, dissed on the league, dissed on the owners, dissed on the commissioner, and everybody said, whoa, hold on. Okay, we may not really agree what's happening here, but that guy on the outside damn sure isn't going to tell us what to do. So we are going to find a way, and you see some teams still had a difficult time finding a way to even be united, but we're going to find a way to show unity, and you heard more sound bites than you ever heard from owners, from coaches, from GMs. I've never seen the owner down on the sideline, the GM on the sideline, locking arms. Yesterday wasn't so much about what this whole thing has been about, inequalities and police brutality and what this initially started as. Yesterday was about, no. We're good here. We're family here. We're going to work this out amongst our family. Don't come in and do that, okay? Don't come in and do that, because now we're all going to bond together and show you that we're going to handle this. And a lot of people still may not agree with it. There's going to be plenty of people that don't agree still with what the players are doing. But that's kind of, I think, the ebb and flow of how that all went. My locker room would have been interesting. I would have liked to have think I could have stood and understood what they were saying and enough to support it. I want to believe that. There's no way of knowing. It's 20 years later. There's no way. I want to believe, because I was such good friends with them, that I would have understood that. But that was a strong locker room. There would have been some. I'm not even going to, wouldn't even sugarcoat it. I'm going to say there might have been some fights in that locker room in the beginning until this thing all got squared away. But again, this yesterday was about somebody from the outside coming in and kind of dumping on all of that and players. I mean, this is one of the first times in a long time you've actually seen players in the league come together about something. And that was exactly the reason why. Someone from the outside coming in and saying that, so they unified.
Extraordinary circumstances. I can't remember anything inside the world of sports. It's funny. There's this new phrase that runs around our place and every place, all of us who got into this line of work, because it is, generally speaking, you're doing what you're doing now because you played football and you're around it all your life. Mm-hmm. I'm doing what I do now because I've been around it because I love it all of my life. And what I love mostly about it is the completely frivolous nature of it. So the phrase "stick to sports" took on an entirely new meaning over the course of this weekend. So we will try and find the right balance for you this morning of talking about these events, because they are sports. There's no sticking to sports. Yes. This is sports. When the President of the United States of America, for all intents and purposes, calls for a boycott of the National Football League, that's as sports can possibly get. But there were obviously games to get to yesterday and major happenings around the NBA, and so we will find time for all of that this morning. Let's start it with Off the Top and go through some of the things that did happen. You mentioned the group chat that we're all in.
Yeah.
You're all now following my wife, Stacy, who just picks Tom Brady every single week and doesn't ask any questions. And yesterday, you saw the reason why.
It's ridiculous. You thought New England was going to lose this game at home.
I have questions for you about some of the decisions Bill O'Brien made in this game, by the way.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people do as well. The Houston Texans had this game, but you gave the ball to Brady and he needed a touchdown and he had time on the clock, so you had to know you were in trouble. Tom Brady's 41st career game-winning drive in the fourth quarter or overtime passed John Elway for fourth most ever on that. Only Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, and Brett Favre are ahead of him in this one. Brady threw 25-yard touchdown pass with 23 seconds ago, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 6th career game with at least 5 touchdowns. and no picks. Only Drew Brees, who's done it 7 times, has more. I mean, he just, as cool as it is. And remember after that first game, everyone went, oh, no, he's 40. He's slowing down.
Yeah, on a 110-degree day on the field yesterday, he threw 5 touchdowns.
In the last 2 games, he has 15 completions of at least 15 air yards in the last 2 games, hoisting that ball downfield. So, wow.
That was
unreal.
one of a spate. You know, that red zone, those 1 o'clock finishes.
Gosh.
Yesterday was as good a day for that as we've had. Forget about this season. I don't think we had a day like this all of last season.
It was unreal.
It was unreal. And we're going to go through all of them for you in a minute.
Off the top.
Meanwhile, there are now only 2 unbeaten teams left in the league, and that will remain that way because both the Cardinals and Cowboys who play tonight have lost a game. So there are only 2 unbeatens at this stretch in the season. That's the fewest there have been, Mike, since 1987.
And that was the replacement players.
Right.
That's going on with the strike back when I was in the league. And so it's the Chiefs. Kareem Hunt's still at it. Now, you fantasy guys that grabbed him, you got a gift late in the game when he ran that 69-yard touchdown run late in the fourth quarter. It's his 3rd straight game, though, with a 50-plus yard touchdown run. This is amazing. Out of the Kansas City Chiefs that we think is this controlled offense, but they have big hitting guys, it was the 9th consecutive regular season game in which Kansas City scored a touchdown of 50 yards or longer. Absolutely incredible. Kareem Hunt is not just about rookies. He's one of 4 players in NFL history with 500 scrimmage yards and 5 touchdowns in his first 3 games of the season, joining Marshall Faulk, Billy Sims, and Jim Brown. Not bad at all. And then, of course, the Falcons, they pull out that victory in a wild game that you thought Detroit won it with a Golden Tate touchdown, but not so fast, and we'll get into that. They're just the 4th team in the last 25 seasons to start 3-0 after losing the Super Bowl in the previous season.
That's
Off the top.
the way they won yesterday.
Oh, my gosh.
Requires a good deal of discussion. But as I mentioned, we do have Arizona and Dallas tonight on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, this is one of those percentage things. You go to 1-2 or 2-1. We'll see how that goes. But the big thing is just seeing how the Cowboys rebound from, especially Zeke Elliott having a career low 8 yards rushing last week. Dallas is 6-1 in primetime over the last 2 seasons, and Elliott is averaging 110 yards rushing in those games. As far as Carson Palmer is concerned, needs 2 passing touchdowns to reach 100 as a member of the Cardinals. He would join Kurt Warner with St. Louis and Arizona, Fran Tarkington with the Giants in Minnesota, and Peyton Manning with Indianapolis and Denver as the only players in NFL history with 100 or more passing touchdowns for multiple teams. So that's pretty impressive on his part.
Off the top.
Elsewhere, Bryce Harper, who has missed the last 41 games with a knee injury, according to reports, will be back. We'll see if he's better than ever for the Nationals today.
Well, that's good because they were scoring less runs. The batting average was lower. The slugging percentage is lower as a team since he's been out, and now he's back. So we'll see what he can bring. It may help Daniel Murphy the most, who'd be getting the bulk of the at-bats in that 3 spot. Nationals look like they'll probably play the Cubs in the NLDS. And you remember last year what happened? The Cubs walked Harper 16 times in 7 games, including 6 in 1 game. Now, they pitched to him this year, so we'll see what that matchup may bring.
Off the top.
Congratulations to Justin Thomas, Mike, who wins the FedEx Cup and $10 million. What a year this young man had. I would say at the beginning of this year, if you're not a reasonably significant fan of the game of golf, you never heard his name at all. Then you started seeing him and you thought, boy, that guy looks 9. And now he just won $10 million yesterday in the FedEx Cup.
The only thing he didn't do that had happened back since 2010 is win this last tournament.
Right.
And then the FedEx Cup. Everybody had won it up until this year. The last person that didn't win this tournament and still win the FedEx Cup was Tiger Woods in 2009. So he's going to be the PGA Player of the Year. You get an extra $10 million bonus. Your caddy's really happy about that as well. He's had an unbelievable season.
Off the top.
And finally, in case you had not heard, late yesterday, the Bulls bought out Dwayne Wade. He agreed to give back $8 million of the money they owed him for this year, and he emerges now as a free agent. So we got Woj and Windy and everybody else working on where Dwayne Wade is going to wind up next. And I'll tell you right now, he is going to go play with LeBron in Cleveland. I'll be stunned if he does not.
I will as well. But the most stunning thing to me is to be in a point in your life where you can give back $8 million. Yeah,
well,
I mean, and he's
Dwayne
there.
Wade, you can do it.
Yeah, he's there. Gave back $8 million to to be that free agent.
Well, this was the buyout that Carmelo didn't want any part
Absolutely.
of. Carmelo wasn't going to give back any money.
Right.
Finally accepted a trade. Did waive his trade kicker.
Right.
So
He's
did give
getting
up
all his
a little money.
Yeah, he gave up that 15% kicker, right.
But Dwayne Wade, reaches a buyout with the Bulls. They give him, he leaves $8 million basically on the table, and so now he is a free agent, and that is a very busy off the top. Brought to you by Zipa. Go to Zipa.com, which is spelled ZYPPAH.com, and get a Zipa so you can stop snoring and enjoy sleeping. So again, the conversation in sports today cannot begin within the lines of the playing fields of the National Football League. It obviously begins outside those lines, to use a phrase that we use frequently here at ESPN, of course. And one of the questions that comes up is, now what? So this really began in earnest a year ago with Colin Kaepernick, but this weekend was a function of what happened Friday night with the president in Huntsville, Alabama, and continued through the weekend with the president of the United States on Twitter. And there were the things that he said and did, and then there was a direct response across the NFL yesterday. And so now the world goes on. And there are a lot of things that we can be concerned about. I would assume that the president is concerned about beyond the National Football League right now. And then where does it go for the NFL right now? That I thought was an interesting question. And Jim Trotter, our terrific NFL reporter, was in multiple locker rooms yesterday trying to find some of those answers.
There's no definitive knowledge on this. I mean, I asked Josh McCown, the Jets quarterback, what happens next? And he said, I don't know. He said, we've got to get together as players and talk about this. And he said, I'm okay continuing with what we've done as long as everybody is on board. We have to be unified. We can't have some players who don't want to do it and others who do. It's got to be unified. But when I went in the Raiders locker room tonight, I asked offensive lineman Kaliche Osemele, I said, is this a one-week thing or will you go forward with it? He said, no, it's a one-week deal. He said it was done in response to something that was said. And he said guys in the locker room who feel that they are role models wanted to take a stand against what the president had said. So I think it's going to differ for each team, and it's up to those players to decide how they want to handle this going forward.
Listen, I agree with that. This weekend was not so much about what they were kneeling for, the cause they were kneeling for. This was obviously in direct response to the president, what he said, calling these guys SOBs that should be fired if they kneel, and calling on the owners to fire them. And, oh, by the way, it was listed all weekend long, the number of owners that gave at least $1 million to the Trump campaign.
7 of them.
7 of them as well. So, I mean, there was, and some of those owners spoke out against what he had said, calling them divisive comments. And I absolutely agree with them. I think they were divisive comments by the president. I don't think there's any doubt about that in my mind at all. If I were a player in that locker room, I would have felt that way. But now what happens? That's a great question, because the games will continue to go. And I think we're going to go back to, what you heard Josh McCown say, I don't know. I think it's going to go back to what it was before that. Some are going to kneel. Some are going to stand, and the ones standing, for the most part, are going to support the ones kneeling. Now, let's not 46 on the sideline of dressed players, not everybody is in agreement. Even yesterday, I'm sure not everybody's in agreement, but they were going to show the sign of unity. That's what they wanted to show. But like everything else, I rarely is there 100% agreement about the topic at hand of still kneeling. You heard, a sporadic number of players saying, I understand why people are kneeling. I wish we could find another way, where the people that are kneeling or have their fists raised are saying this is our way of making people aware and have this issue talked about. So there's still that discussion. That's still going to go on. I think what's going to happen, it's going to go back to what we've seen. Some will sit. Some will kneel, some will stand and have their hand on a guy that's kneeling or their arm around him. I think that's what's going to happen. This week you just saw guys talk about it more. You saw owners and or GMs on the sideline more, and you had definitive plans more with certain teams not even going out on the field for the national anthem. I could be wrong, but I think the only team where everybody stood was the Carolina Panthers. And Ron Rivera, even in the meeting the night before, he kind of intimated that's what he wanted everybody to do. Now, the only person that didn't show was Julius Peppers. He didn't want to stand, so he stayed in the locker room. To me, kind of listening to his head coach and saying, okay, if they're all going to do it that way, I'm not. I'm going to go into the locker room then, and I believe everybody else stood. Other than that, you basically, if the president didn't say anything, you outside of the owners and GMs being down there, how much was there different? The arms interlocking, I think, was different, but you still had some guys kneeling and some guys standing. And the hope is that that everybody is or most people are in unison of understanding why this is going on. Because then you sit there and you go, another, tentacle of this is the NASCAR owners are all saying, get them out of the country, put them on a bus, send them out if they're not standing. I'd fire my guy if he knelt down. So, I mean, you have the hardcore that way, as well. So this is something that ain't going anywhere. It's still going to be talked about. The actions are still going to be there, and people are going to have very, very, very different views on it.
All right, we are going to continue to discuss this as our morning continues. We are presented here at Mike and Mike by Progressive Insurance. Last year, over 3 million drivers switched to Progressive. Call or click today and find out if you could save. You will hear from a lot of the people that were directly involved in this. And then, of course, there is the sports of the conventional variety that we will cover all morning long. Dwayne Wade is a free agent. Carmelo Anthony is a member of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And there was a fabulous fury of finishes in the 1 o'clock games yesterday that included a 61-yard field goal and an overturn of a call that ended a game with a 10-second runoff, plus Tom Brady, plus what the Bears did. We have all of it covered for you as we get this thing started.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, we help keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT. Home. Safe home.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
All right, all morning we'll also read tweets from you through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed, and all opinions are welcome here, whether we share them or not. And so to make it clear, us reading these tweets is not an endorsement of what's being said, but an acknowledgement that we live in a country where everyone is supposed to be allowed to have an opinion. Let's see here. Brooks tweets, kneeling is a fad that won't change anything. Donate your time or money to a cause and vote. That'll do a lot more.
See, I disagree with that. And, oh, by the way, a lot of players are donating their time and their money, and some of it is public, you see, and some of it is not. And not every player has a camera following them when they doing some good for others. And what this is doing, kneeling is doing, or supposed to do, is supposed to get conversation going. And I think in some circles it is. I'll take out yesterday more because it was more about what the president said about the players and the players responding to that than about the actual topics at hand of why they were kneeling in the first place.
K Dubs tweets at you, at ESPN Golic. Thank you for saying you don't know how you would have responded. Some of the most honesty on this issue yet. That's why I wanted to start there. Because everyone is talking about this, but not everyone has the luxury of a 9-year NFL veteran sitting on their set who can talk about with some insight. I mean, you obviously weren't in any of those locker rooms yesterday, much less all of them. But you have a much better sense than most do of how that probably went, at least in the way these discussions went in defining themselves, because that's the one thing I learned from my years of covering sports and the NFL more than any of the other sports. Is that you walk into that locker room as 53 individuals and you walk out as one unit. And if you don't, you have no chance to succeed. And that is preached in that sport more than any of the others.
Yeah, and that's what you show. You may not agree with what's going on. And as I talked about a little earlier, I tried to put myself in the Philadelphia Eagles locker room, the place I spent most of my time as a 25 to 29 to 30-year-old, in what I would have done. And as I said, I never would have knelt down or sat for the national anthem, but I would like to have believed I would have listened to my teammates that did and try and understand what they were saying. But again, I was 25 to 29, 30-year-old, professional athlete who, thinks we're invincible and thinks we're the smartest people on the face of the earth sometimes. Or I shouldn't say that way. I should put it away that we're pretty staunch in our ways. I think, and I don't know, I wasn't in all the locker rooms. I would imagine there would have been some pretty heated disagreements in our locker room in Philadelphia, in the locker room. But we would have come out of that locker room, however we decided to do it, showing as one. and not a divided group. That I can assure you of, that we would not have walked out of that locker room without at least having an understanding of we need to be in this together.
All right, keep your reaction coming all morning long. We're Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests all day on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line with what we hope will be a wide variety of opinion and insight into all of these topics. Meanwhile, I mentioned that 1 o'clock window yesterday, those finishes at Red Zone. Scott Hansen will always say, here comes the best hour of television of the week. And it isn't always. In fact, in the first 2 weeks combined, it had largely stunk. There were only 5 games in the first 2 weeks combined that were decided by one possession in the 1 o'clock window. Well, there were 5 games in yesterday's 1 o'clock window alone decided by one possession. Those games were won by Atlanta, Chicago, Indianapolis, New England, and Philadelphia. I'm going to take 4 of the fabulous. Indianapolis didn't really have a fabulous finish. They were winning most of the game, and a nice Jacoby Brissett running for a bunch of touchdowns. Mm-hmm. But let's focus on the 4 that had ridiculous finishes. And I set aside a question for each of you, or each of them for you. Let's start with Houston, New England. So for those of you who didn't see how this thing goes, Houston makes a couple of decisions that were really fascinating, gets one terrible no call on a holding that really changes the complexion of the game, because they wind up kicking a field goal where they might have otherwise gotten a touchdown. But at the end, they're up 2, and they've got a 4th and half a yard on New England's side of the field. At that point, I'm yelling at the television, Bill, go for it. I understand kicking the field goal and going up 5. You're a team that is going to win this season based on your defense. Right. I get it. They're a defensive team, and they're starting a rookie quarterback. So I understand you want to put this game on JJ. You want to put this game on Jadeveon Clowney. You want to put this game on your defense and say, if I keep Tom Brady out of the end zone, I win. A field goal doesn't beat me. Kick the field goal. I get it. But that's still Tom Brady on the other side of the field. Yeah. In my opinion, you had a chance to bury them, make the first down, go down and score a touchdown. At minimum, they only had 1 timeout left. The game's basically over if they get a half a yard in that spot, and he kicks the field goal, and down comes Tom Terrific, and we all see what happens. What did you make of that decision?
I'm not as sure, like in my heart I would have said, let's go for it. I mean, there's part of me that would have said, let's just end this thing. The biggest thing I would have said is, how can I not let Tom Brady have the ball? And the best way to do it would be gain a half yard. On the other side of that, the fact that Tom Brady had thrown, 4 touchdown passes already?
Yes.
But my defense had sacked him 5 times. We were getting pressure on him, though he did have 4 touchdown passes. And obviously, if you don't make the half a yard, then you are, they need a field goal to win, and they're basically, within 2 first downs of getting that field goal to win. Yeah. If you don't make that, you could basically say we're losing this game, because Tom is going to move it, 20 yards or whatever it needed to go for a field goal. At the end of it all, I probably would have said, you know what, I can't let Tom have the ball back. And when all is said and done, there are a couple of quarterbacks, he and Aaron Rodgers, where I say I can't let those guys have the ball. So I think at that point I would have taken the chance and gone for the half yard. But I'm not going to lose my mind on it.
I'm
absolutely not. I'm going to say you went up 5. Your defense did have sacks that game. That's the best part of your team. They got to step up. The professionals out there, they got to step up. You're going to make New England go, the entire field. You have to have the ability to not let them go down the field and score a touchdown.
They also did a very poor job with time management at the very end. They're not using a timeout, and they wind up giving themselves just one shot at a Hail Mary where they should have had at least 1, if not 2 more opportunities to move the ball down the field and see if they could get within field goal range. Either way, it is a thrilling win for the Patriots. And I'll say this. Deshaun Watson acquitting himself extraordinarily well. You saw the stat everywhere that no quarterback has ever gone into that building and beaten Belichick and Brady, and he came awfully close yesterday in what was in a day filled with incredibly exciting games. This was a terrific football game.
No, it absolutely was, and I definitely think the expectation was that New England was going to win this game, and Houston gave them all they could handle. So New England's New England. After the week 1, when everybody thought, about Tom Brady, put those aside and just take Tom Brady every week in your fantasy pool, okay? That's just what you have to do. I look at this more for Houston and say, you know what? Went to New England. We already saw Kansas City go there and win. We went to New England. We had that team on the ropes, and they're one of the better teams in the AFC. And our quarterback fared pretty well. When in all the situations when you say a rookie quarterback against Bill Belichick, and he went in there and threw for over 300 yards, ran for another 40-plus yards, kept his head in some situations. Still a rookie, making some rookie mistakes, but you have to like what you saw out of him in his development going forward.
Absolutely. That was, of all the things that came out of yesterday, the Texans are 1-2. And yet, I think I emerged feeling better about them than I did almost any other team after the disaster that was their Week 1 performance. And you know what Jacksonville did to Baltimore yesterday in London?
Wow.
You know, makes that one look a little. What can we say about the Jaguars? Week 1 and Week 3, they looked like the best team in the National Football League, sandwiched around a total no-show.
Yeah, and Baltimore forgot to get on the plane to go to London, and then you see what Tennessee does to Seattle. So that division all of a sudden, huh?
It's a crazy week in that. But let's just focus for 1 minute here on Houston.
Mm-hmm.
That defense is good. Giving up 5 touchdown passes to Brady, while obviously nothing that you're going to put on a resume, is certainly does not make you a unique team. I think that the rookie quarterback, assuming he's just going to get better and better as the season goes on, and they've got some weapons, I really like Houston. I like the way they looked yesterday. They had a million opportunities to win that game. And look, they almost beat Brady and Belichick in that building last year in the playoffs. They gave them the toughest game they had in the AFC.
They had 407. They outgained New England, and they held the ball for, 7 more minutes in New England. You have to be happy with what you saw out of your quarterback. Just in case Deshaun Watson was 22 of 33, a couple interceptions, but certainly had the touchdowns as well, for 301 yards. I mean, I thought he played well. Against New England, you would expect a rookie to look more like a rookie. I really like what they've done. Without question. So, yeah, going forward, especially in that division, I think that's going to be a fun division to watch.
Absolutely, and a huge game in that division this week. They've got Tennessee coming into Houston. So Titans at Texans in a matchup of what I think are the two best teams in that division, although, the people in Jacksonville may have something to say about that as we go. All right, just getting the football part of the football conversation rolling along this morning. Other fabulous finishes. One question on each of those games as we go. Jeff Saturday still today, Booger McFarland today, Jalen Rose today, Lewis Riddick today, and more. Cook 1975 tweets, if I voiced my political opinions at work, I'd be fired. Work is not the time or the place. That probably is true in some workplaces. I really don't know where everyone's job is a little bit different.
Yes. There are some things that happen at some companies that don't happen at others. That's true everywhere. So, yes, you may get fired if you do that in your workplace. In the NFL, at this point, they do not. And it's something Donald Trump called for and called the ones that knelt SOBs as well. And he went down a road and chastised the NFL and its commissioner and its players for what they're doing. And this is how the players responded. I want to, because everybody joined us now, go back to, what David said. Why can't athletes protesting choose another way? It doesn't disrespect our servicemen and our women. And as Greeny said a couple of minutes ago, this is the one thing that's brought up all the time. And I get it. As I said, my father and father-in-law were in the Marines. So I understand that. And I've seen way too many servicemen and women who have lost limbs or in memory of who have given their lives to know exactly what that stands for. And I so respect that. And we've heard player time after time after time say this has nothing to do with the military. Nothing. We've had military people say the players have every right to do that. That's what I fought for. So they're backing the players in this peaceful protest. Peaceful protest. Not a Charlottesville type of protest. A peaceful protest. So to me, what seems to be going on is people stick to that one side of it and say you're disrespecting the military, when to me the flag means, the country we live in, I agree, is the greatest country in the world, without question. And that flag flying, is a symbol of that to me. But it's a symbol of a lot of things. One of the main things is who gave their life so that flag can fly and the freedoms that I have. But it also means different things as well to the freedoms in this country. And to some people, there aren't as many freedoms in certain aspects of it. And that's what they're protesting. And that's what military people who have understood that are saying, said, we get it. We fought till that flag can fly, and we understand why some in the NFL are doing a peaceful protest against some of the things they disagree with. So I think they agree, or there's some harmony there that gets the discussion hopefully going to a good resolution. But you know, a lot of times, a lot of people think the flag means exactly one thing. When I think, to me anyway, all I can do is speak for me. It means a lot of different things to me. But one of the main things is what the military has done, and we can never thank them enough. And the players have said that time and time and time again.
D. Brandon Burtis tweets, if these professional, and he puts the word professional all in capital letters, do not have the decency to at least stand, then I'll decide not to watch. Hashtag NFL boycott.
Listen, that's your right. By the way, the ratings for the first couple of weeks have been down compared to last year, and the ratings in college football have been up. So maybe there are people that are tuning away because of it. You know what, Brandon? That is absolutely your right. And I saw a lot of that on Twitter yesterday, and my thought is, instead of answering every one of them, is you're right. You fans, whether it's ticket prices or whatever your reason is, you guys have the power. You don't have to show up to a game, and you don't have to watch a game if for some reason you don't like what's going on. It's always been your right to do.
John Mill tweets, I don't support the way the players are doing it, but I support their freedom to do it. So a wide variety of opinion, as you might imagine, and we'll continue to hear from you and from various players and others around the league all day long. Meanwhile, on the field, time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks. No contract, going through the games. How about the way the Atlanta-Detroit game ends?
Wow.
I assume most of you are aware of what happens yesterday, but Detroit throws a game-winning touchdown pass, only it wasn't. First and foremost, do you believe there was enough visual evidence to overturn the call?
Yeah, the knee was down and the ball wasn't across the line. You know, because when you saw it bang, bang, you thought it was a touchdown. You saw him laying and you thought the ball was across. I never even really thought about the replay, to be honest with you. And I don't think a lot of the Detroit players did either. I thought they felt it was a touchdown. You could see a couple of the Atlanta players. Now, maybe they were just doing it out of hope, pointing that he was down, maybe just hoping that was the thing. But when I saw it, I did see his knee down and the ball did not cross the line.
I'll say this. Right when it happened, I was sitting with a bunch of people. I said, are we sure he was in? Now, the notion that there was going to be a 10-second runoff certainly didn't enter my mind. I was thinking, here we go. We're going to get ourselves one more play, and it's going to be a game winner if they overturn this. Not knowing, for those of you who did not see or for whatever reason not aware of what happened, they ruled that he was down by contact with 8 seconds left. Yep. And by rule, because they did not have a timeout left, they ruled a 10-second runoff. I saw Dean Blandino explaining on Twitter that the spirit of the rule is that the clock would have run out.
Basically, they've decided it basically takes 10 seconds to run a play. So there's one of two ways. If it had been called what turns out to be correctly during the play, if the officials signaled that Golden Tate was down on the half-yard line, all likelihood they would not have gotten another play off. They didn't have a timeout. There was 8 seconds when he was whistled down, so you highly doubt they would have gotten the playoff in 8 seconds.
For those of you who asked the question, what if they had a timeout? If they had a timeout, they would have been allowed to use it ex post facto, which is to say that a timeout would have removed the 10-second runoff as it does in any situation. Right. So they have no timeout left. They take the time off the clock, and just like that, the game ends.
Over.
It literally goes from one team winning to the other team winning on that overtime.
By an official explaining it. That was it. One
on
team
the road.
won.
How'd you like to make that announcement?
You run. But you know what? I thought the official explained it extremely well. You understood it. And every Detroit player and fan was depressed.
That was the second to quietest stadium I heard all weekend long after Iowa. After what happened on the walk-off touchdown by Penn State against Iowa, which featured maybe the best performance I've seen by a college football player in a very, very long time. And I know you know who I mean. Straight Talk Wireless nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks will continue with one of the busiest sports days of the year, both on and off the fields of play. Tons of basketball news to get into, all the college and more. Stay with us. We're busy on a Monday. It's Mike and Mike.
First time skydiving?
Sure is.
Okay, you just open the door like this and you jump. Wait.
Should we be like in tandem?
Tandem? That's a great idea.
Are you a certified instructor?
No, but I love parachutes and I love people. Here we go.
You wouldn't take chances with an uncertified skydiving instructor. Don't do it with your finances. Find a certified financial planner professional today at letsmakeaplan.org. CFP. Work with the highest standard.
Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance. So you can feel at home, wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT. Home, safe home.
Here we are, second hour this morning. Again, a unique day. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests galore on the way with perspective all across the spectrum on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Jeff Saturday in this hour. He's a high school football coach.
Yes.
I'm really interested to hear from him, in addition to questions about things happening on the field, what sorts of questions his high school players have about this sort of stuff. Booger McFarland today, Jalen Rose today, Louis Riddick. Jalen will talk about, among other things, huge NBA happenings. Dwayne Wade has been bought out by the Chicago Bulls, that coming down late yesterday. And so all the speculation, will they go play with LeBron? Will they go play with Carmelo in Oklahoma City? San Antonio is another of the teams that people are looking at. So there's a ton of basketball to talk about today as well. And again, Saquon Barkley, to me, I know people have talked a lot about him. I've seen a lot of flashes of him. That might have been the first game of his that I've watched every snap of. It was this year. Forget it. I mean, there's just nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, between him and McSorley, who caught the winning touchdown pass, I mean, they got a dynamic duo there, but he's incredible.
My goodness.
Incredible.
Barkley is ridiculous.
He has another gear. And his subtle moves, I'm going to do a highlight tape of him because I want to see him run again.
And I want to watch it.
His subtle moves are unreal, and all they do is lead the defender in the wake, and then he has an extra gear to pull away. It's really something to
And
watch.
he combines it, though. He's got all that shake. He combines it with power.
Yeah, he does. He can drop a shoulder on you.
Strong.
Yeah,
He's unbelievable.
Something else. Well, what a game that was.
That was a ridiculously good football game. But, of course, the action on the field today in so many ways taking a backseat to the things that happened involving the president first Friday night and then through the day on Saturday and candidly through most of yesterday on Twitter and what it begat in the way of protests on the field across the National Football League. And I think you said it exactly right. For the last year or so, Colin Kaepernick being perhaps the genesis of it, these have been protests aimed at certain things in our society, at elements of police brutality, at elements of a lack of racial equality. What yesterday was a show of unity amongst the National Football League family against someone from the outside, someone with the largest and most loudest and most powerful bully pulpit in the world that attacked them. And as you said, attack one, attack all when it comes to the National Football League. That's what yesterday was.
That's exactly what it was. It wasn't about what, in my mind at least, what they were kneeling for in the first place, which was about the inequalities and the racial tension and police brutality, what these guys have said over and over again when they kneel down. Yesterday was about, how many times have we talked about the players and the owners in the league not getting along? Well, yesterday they were all going to show unity together because it was basically we can rip ourselves amongst ourselves, but nobody from the outside can. And that's exactly what the president did in a way that I guess nothing's shocking with him anymore at this point and how he's going to come after people. But it was a little surprising, all starting with the uninviting of the Golden State Warriors after some said they weren't going to go to the White House and just kind of snowballed into the president calling players who knelt SOBs and down that road. So this was the players showing their unity, however they decided to show their unity. And even amongst that, there can be, not as much harmony in deciding what you want to do because you saw the arms locked everywhere. And I think for the most part, they all agreed on how they wanted to go up. But I'm just telling you straight out, there are those in locker rooms that don't agree with players that are kneeling. And there are those in the locker rooms that players that kneel don't appreciate the fact that they're not getting support by some that don't kneel. That's going to happen in any business, though. As I gave my thoughts earlier on what would go on in our Philadelphia Eagle locker room, I'm going to try and get a hold of Seth Joyner, who's doing a ton in the media right now, who was a teammate and a friend of mine and still is, about what may have gone on in that locker room. We could only project and wonder. Again, I was 25 to 30 years old at that time, so I would like to believe what I would have done is the right thing, but I can't sit here and say it truthfully that I would have, no matter what, been with my guys who knelt down. I'd like to have believed they were my friends, and I would have listened to what they had to say. And then it went yesterday to, I think one of the more interesting ones, Greeny, was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin basically said, you guys figure out how you want to do this. And they couldn't come to an agreement on how they wanted to do it, how they wanted to be on the sideline for their game in Chicago, on what avenue they wanted to go down. So Mike Tomlin basically said, well, just stay in the locker room. just take yourself away from the situation, and that picture was everywhere, where it was Mike Tomlin and a few other coaches out there and nobody else on the sideline. And that was what was decided amongst them as a team, as a unit, to stay in the locker room. And as we all know, Alejandro Villanueva, the offensive tackle who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, large left tackle for the Steelers, walked out of the tunnel, stood at attention, and put his hand over his heart. And there were a couple of players for the Steelers, one who said, hey, it's kind of not what we agreed upon, but we have such respect for him that so be it. James Harrison kind of said, you know what, I thought we were in this, going to do this whole thing together. I guess that wasn't what it was. He kind of went off, didn't go off, but kind of was like, I thought we were all going to stick together here, and I guess that's not what we did, because Villanueva walked out of the tunnel. And so a lot of people were asking, is he wrong or is he right? His team is in the tunnel. That's what they decided to do as a team. Should he have been that teammate and stay in there? But, his team is also guys, men and women that he stood with in Afghanistan for a couple of tours, and where it's a little bit different than helping a guy up after a play and talking about a win and a loss when you're talking about life and death. I've had such a privilege of meeting so many people that are vets, and I can't respect people more for what they do for our country, without question. So to me, when you ask me about this, in all honesty, in that locker room, I could have easily have said, okay, this is what we're going to decide to do. Alexander, whatever you want to do, you do. Okay? You dude, listen, we have teams. I always talk about the team in the locker room, my family, and then the team is like your family. Well, this guy was on another team. A team where life and death was at stake, and talk about really relying on the men or the women next to you. So to me, I would have given him his, and anybody who served, their choice. If you want to stay with us, that's cool. But we know that you were part of another team, a team where there was a hell of a lot more on the line than what we're going on through here. So if you feel you need to go out, then you go out. That would have been my thought and my opinion on that situation.
Yeah, and Cam Hayward said, I don't want to go into that. We support our guy, Al. He feels he had to do what this guy served our country. We thank him for it. So that was part of
so he did.
That was part of the support
right,
that he received.
And James Harrison said that he didn't think anyone was exempt from the pregame plan. We thought we were all in attention with the same agreement, obviously, but I guess we weren't. So that was from the military side. I gave it from the football side. I'm curious from your side, a fan side. I mean, we have fans. The ratings are down. We have fans. Some say, say they're never going to watch again. Some say they turned it off. And others, a lot of people did watch. There's still a ton of people watching. A ton of people were at the stadium. So while the ratings have been down some, there's no doubt about that. And in college, they have been up. So you can see some correlation to this. So I spoke about it from a player. We talk about from the military side. Where's a fan? Where are you?
You said an interesting thing earlier this morning. You said that your perspective when you were in your 20s might have been different from what it is now, and I think I would fall into the same place. One of the things that I think I've learned, I hope I've learned, as I've gotten older, is I'm trying, with the exception of jokingly, to get out of the business of telling other people what they should think and what they should do about things. The world gets bigger and bigger as you get older, and that, I think, encompasses not just geographics or geography, but it encompasses ideas. I have become much more accepting of other people's ideas. I don't like to use the word tolerant. We should not be tolerating each other. Yeah. We should be accepting each other's ideas. So someone in the diner where I eat breakfast every morning yesterday said to me, who was very opposed to the protests, and everyone knew that were going to come during the games yesterday, that at that point had not yet kicked off, and knows that I don't feel the same way, said to me, well, Greeny, would you ever do that? And I thought about it for a second, and my response was, maybe one of the best ways I can think of to define freedom is to say, you have the right to do things I wouldn't do. And I have the right to do things you might not do, so long as what I'm doing doesn't infringe upon your right to do what you want to do. So here's what I've said numerous times lately. Maybe it applies better to this than anything else. Freedom can be defined a lot of different ways. The way I'll define it is as follows. The freedom that we have as Americans is for each of us to live in the America of our own choosing. And that, the way we choose that, is largely going to be a product of our life experience. So the life experience, the experience you have had in your life, Mike, and that I've had have been totally different. We've wound up in the same place and sit next to each other for all these years. And we have a lot of very similar ideas about life and a lot of very different ones. And those largely come from the fact that we were raised differently in different places, in different circumstances, and thus we view the world differently. Donald Trump, and he lives in his own America, in the America of his choosing, which he is his own right to do. He has had his life experience, whatever it may be, and however strongly I may disagree with a lot of the things that he does and he says, he has a right to think them. And so do all of those players saying and doing what they wish. And that's what I say. I say, if you are going to accept the freedom, if you're going to set the notion, the very American, the most American belief that we have is that we each individually have the freedom to do what we wish, then I don't personally understand how you can say those guys should be fined, suspended, or otherwise should not have the right to do what they are doing. What I would have zero issue with if the president said, as an American citizen, as a human being, it offends me to see that. It bothers me.
Absolutely.
I don't like it. It turns me off.
Yeah.
That is 100% within everyone's right to say. For the President of the United States to say those guys should be fired or suspended, I strongly disagree with. For him to call the players, you know what he called them.
SOBs, yeah.
I think the word that keeps being used is divisive. I'm not sure that I believe that's a strong enough word to use to describe it. That's how he chooses to behave himself. There's very little I can do about that. But what I can say, as what I believe as a patriotic American citizen is, I support the right of every American, whether they are a professional football player, a professional athlete, or in any other walk of life, to do whatever he or she chooses, so long as it is not taking, I'm not sure what the word I'd be looking for here is. That your rights to your freedom ends at the bridge of my nose, or whatever the expression that I'm butchering is. So to me, it's pretty much as simple as that. And I don't, for the life of me, understand how anyone who considers freedom to be the most significant right that we have as Americans, how any of them can see it any other way.
Yeah, and again, as long as it's peaceful and you're not harming another person.
Right.
I mean,
I was trying to think of the way to say that.
It should go without saying, but unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't. So here we are, and it was an interesting Sunday, and I thought one of the interesting topics was what happens next week. And the week after that. And I think you're going to see exactly what you saw before. You may not see owners and GMs down on the field anymore, but you may still see linked arms, and you're still going to see some guys kneeling and some guys not kneeling, and you'll continue to have the discussion. Some people will continue to have the discussion. Some people will still be disgusted that they're doing it. I mean, I looked specifically in my timeline for military, or people who say they've been in the military. You would hope somebody wouldn't make that up. And I've got them all from I served in the military and I'm disgusted by what they're doing. I served in the military, and while I disagree with what they're doing, they have every right to do it. And I served in the military and I have no problem with what they're doing. Gotten them all in about equal amounts as well. So those are the ones you certainly want to hear from, because that's part of the flag that makes it stand so brightly, is what those people, those men and women, have done for us. And so even though the players are saying it has nothing to do, so many of these players have parents that served.
Yeah.
So they're not
including the baseball player who knelt this weekend.
They're not disrespecting them, but there are some people that say if you do it, no matter what, you can say that all you want, you're still disrespecting them. Everybody has their opinion on this, but what I hope after this weekend, because yesterday was something different when the kneeling was first for. So I hope that we can get back to, and the players can express themselves in a way that is talking about why they're protesting.
Correct.
There can be actual conversation about that could lead to something else in communities. We'll have to continue to wait and see about that.
All right. So those are just a few of our thoughts. And again, we want to hear from you all morning long, and we'll continue with those on Twitter. And you're going to hear from Paul Tagliabue coming up, and Rex Ryan yesterday, if you missed it, on our pregame show here. We're Mike and Mike, brought to you in part by Shell Pennzoil, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Let's go back on the field as we try and find a balance of those. And I got to get to some of the basketball here as well, because there's big stuff there. But I want the Lions' response. You saw I told you that what Dean Blandino tweeted yesterday. Again, he's the former head of officiating who's now working in broadcasting, and he tweeted the spirit of the rule. He actually used the term, the spirit of the rule is that the clock would have run out. And the Lions tweeted back in response, and I've got 1 million Lions fans on my timeline tweeting back that they at one point last year ran 27 yards down the field and ran a play in 8 seconds. The point is, Dean Blandino is not telling you they couldn't have gotten a playoff. No. He's telling you that's the rule, and that's why it's the rule.
It is the rule. You can say you can get the playoff, but they came up with 10 seconds as basically around the time you think you can run a play. So that's why it's the runoff. So it's not just in their opinion. They didn't get up there and say, you know what, in our opinion, they couldn't have got a playoff. The game is over.
Right, exactly.
They didn't do that.
And Dean wasn't saying that. The point is they're yelling at Dean Blandino as though he's saying, well, you couldn't have gotten a playoff. This is the rule.
The rule.
It was the rule before the game started.
And it's still the rule. And you may not like the rule, and the rule costs you here. I get it. But it is the rule, whether you think it's a good rule or a bad rule, and I'm sure all of you think in Detroit think it's a bad rule right now, but it is the rule. So it was once they got that they thought Golden Tate was down, they got everything else correct. They got it all correct. And watching it in slow motion, I thought he was down as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely close.
It is, but that's what replay does.
Yeah, and it's one of those where the call having been a touchdown initially, I'm not 100% sure I would have overturned it, to be completely honest with you. But I understand once they do, I understand the application of the rule, and I don't have any problem with it. If that's the rule, that's the rule. There's no way to go back and undo what happened. We can't say, okay, let's pretend that he didn't score and see if you would have gotten the playoff.
Everybody stand where you were after the play.
3, 2, 1, go. Obviously you can't do that. You got to do something. They have a rule in place. They didn't make it up in the moment. The rule existed before the play was run. All right, 2 other games. Giants-Eagles, another one that ends with a 61-yard field goal, which was an unbelievable finish to what was an unbelievable game where the New York Giants spent 15 quarters this season in which they only scored 13 points. And then they scored 21 points in a flurry in the fourth quarter yesterday that looked like they were going to win the game at Philly. And then we saw what happened.
It was unreal watching that game, thinking the Giants fans had to be thinking, we're going to go 0-16. We can't score. We can't score. There's nothing we can do here. And so in a game that came down to the fourth quarter, you had 2 receiving touchdowns both in the fourth quarter, 2 dropped, both of which cost the Giants a first down, 2 penalties for 25 yards, both coming in the fourth quarter, 1 offensive pass interference, 1 unsportsmanlike conduct.
All of those being Odell.
Right?
Yeah.
I was getting to that. All Odell. And then when the kick went off, it was a 61-yarder. So what do? You put a return man back there. And it was Odell Beckham who was back there watching the ball go over the crossbar at 61 yards. So, by the way, pay Odell, okay? The man deserves to be the highest paid player or receiver in the league. He made that incredible touchdown catch holding the ball to his shoulder. But, has a penalty, has a couple of drops as well. There's still other things involved. But he is fantastic. But Giant fans had to just be like, we can't score. And then all of a sudden they're winning this game. And I thought we're going to win this game until a 61-yard field goal by a rookie from Memphis. Unreal. And there's great video going around. We're trying to get it of his parents, the reaction of his parents in the stands. Mom losing his mind, dad trying not to cry. I mean, it was just fantastic to watch. But what a boot. What an app, as Doug Peterson, the head coach, said, sounded like a cannon shot coming off his foot. It had to at 61 yards, but you had to have a great snap and great hold. You had it all just inside the upright, incredibly close, and just clears the crossbar for a game. That was one of the, me and my wife are sitting in our chairs, both started screaming at it. It was just, you could have no skin in this game, and you just had to just jump out of your seat when you saw something like that.
Very quickly on Odell, because I agree with you, he is that whole team.
He is.
He's the entire team. Any chance they have, and I don't think they're dead and buried at 0-3. I really don't. Call me crazy. I don't think they're dead and buried at 0-3. But the dog peeing celebration yesterday, which gets a 15-yard penalty, is just the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my. It's one of those that makes you say, "What are you doing?"
I know.
I mean, I love watching him play. He is probably the most interesting individual player in the National Football League to watch right now. And again, they have no chance to win this game without him, and they have no chance to have a season, if they even do anymore anyway, without him. But that's the most ridiculous. That's one of those that makes you want to say, "What is the matter with you?"
What are you doing?
I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous. And he explained it afterwards. Well, I'm trying to be like a dog, and so that's what a dog. What are you doing? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that was bizarre. Yeah, I would agree with that.
He lifts his leg, and I'm not sure. I guess it's a 15-yard penalty because it's just distasteful.
Is that what? I don't know.
They did call it a penalty.
I mean, usually there's a reason for it. It's distasteful, just like the Von Miller one against Tyrod Taylor was ridiculous.
That shouldn't be a penalty.
No way. That supposedly, for those that don't know, Tyrod Taylor was on the ground. Von Miller got up off the top of him, put his hand out to help him up. Tyrod reached his hand out, and Von did what you see people do all the time, pulled his hand up like, ha, psych, and he kind of laughed at Tyrod. Tyrod got up and kind of laughed at him, went their separate ways, and the ref threw the flag and said taunting. I'm like,
critical
are
penalty.
You kidding me? I mean, they were laughing at one another, and they called that a flag.
And that's a huge penalty in the game.
My gosh.
Extends a Buffalo drive that winds up basically putting the game out of reach. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. We still haven't gotten to what happened in Chicago yesterday.
Wow.
I mean, after the game began, with a variety of, including one of the most ridiculous plays I've ever seen in my entire life, and a sensational finish.
Yep, sure
for a
was.
Bears team that almost has two incredibly good home wins
against two really good teams.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Right now, we're thrilled to welcome Jeff Saturday into our studio, as we do every Monday morning. Good morning, Jeff.
Morning. How y'all doing this morning?
Good. We're doing well, and obviously there's a balance this morning between the things that happened over the weekend involving the president and the conversation, and then all of the protests before the game, and then the games themselves.
Yeah.
The one thing I wanted to ask you about is we know that you coach high school football.
Yeah.
I'm just very curious. What kinds of questions are you hearing? What kinds of conversation are you hearing amongst your players, the kids who are anywhere from, 14 to 18 years old, as they see all of this? It's a time in your life where you're learning so much about the world in which you live, and so many of them, I'm sure, aspire to go on in football, and so this is something that they're seeing in the game. I'm just curious, what are you hearing from your players, and what questions are they asking?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, with the comments that the president made, that always brings people's attention, right? And especially the language that he used. And so at the school where I don't speak that way, right? I don't speak to them that way on the field. If I do hear it, I clean that kind of stuff up. So we start from there. Just the way we treat each other, the way that we speak to each other is important, and the value that I feel that holds. And so when we have these discussions as young men, it's whether you agree or disagree, the way that you approach someone and the way that you speak to them is the most important thing to me. You may not agree with somebody, you may completely disagree, it may be a value you hold dear, but at the end of the day, you have to be respectful of that person and their feelings as well, because they're going to feel the same way on the other side. So just being able to have those type of conversations with young men, trying to develop them into young men, because like you said, they're forming all kinds of opinions and decisions on their own, and you have to allow that to happen. And we have families that there are strong military presence, whether and service people, whether it's police, firefighters, all the different things that they have. So you have it all over. It spreads all over. And that's just like the locker room that I lived in for 25, 30 years, right? I mean, that's what it looks like. You're going to agree with people politically. You're going to disagree, agree, disagree through religion, everything that you can go through. But ultimately, as a team, we have to learn to live together and perform together and have each other's back.
So we have at kind of both sides of this. You have the professional ranks where these are grown men making decisions that they want to make. You have, in my opinion, the ridiculousness of what was it, third grade youth football where the kids were kneeling. Has nothing to do with them. They're just doing their parents' agenda, or they don't want a spotlight or whatever. It's mind-boggling with the parents there. How about high school? These are now 16, 18-year-olds. Have they discussed kneeling? How have you brought it up? Have you said we're going to stand? How has this been worked out with you? And have you seen it in some of your games with other teams?
No, it's funny you said that, because the team that we just played last Friday night is a military academy, and but we as in our schools, we don't come out for the national anthem. We come out after. They do that early in the pregame festivities, and we're asked to be in the locker rooms. But Riverside Academy, who we played, they actually do, because they are a military academy, so they do they make sure that they're out there and they set it that way. But every other, we haven't had that issue. It's not something that is ever brought up through us.
And it has come up a lot in conversation that it was not until, I believe, 2009 that every NFL team was on the sideline. So when you guys played, there were games that you weren't on the sideline.
Only occasionally were we out there for the national anthem.
Right.
For the most part, we weren't.
It was interesting. I was actually in that group where it switched.
Right.
So you had to talk about it. Like, how are you going to do? Are you going to put your toes on the white line?
Right.
Where's the coach going to stand? Where players? It was interesting.
Oh, it was.
Even to get the whole thing started.
Toes
it was
on the line, helmet under the right arm.
Yeah, where are you going to be? What if a guy's got a tight hammy? He's trying to get his warm up going because as soon as it's over, you're basically running on the field.
Going,
It was all those things. So it was interesting, even how we got there to begin with.
Yeah.
It's been a run.
All right, let's get to football on the field here with Jeff Saturday and some Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. So many really interesting games yesterday, many of them in the early window, and we were just talking about Pittsburgh, Chicago. And the way that game ends is remarkable. And the Bears, they had Atlanta an excellent chance to beat them in their own building. Then they beat Pittsburgh yesterday. Mike Glennon makes some huge mistakes, but also gets enough done to win.
Does.
Some big plays made in the overtime. But what do you imagine the conversation is like for Marcus Cooper, who doesn't run that ball all the way back into the end zone? I mean, that's unimaginable.
Oh, he is kicking himself, and you saw it on his face as soon as it happened. I mean, and the interesting part for me is, that's not a regular. It's not a normal offense defensive play. So like on a special teams, 5 or 6 of those guys are fresh.
Right.
So when you scoop the score, 5 or 6 of those guys, that's all they do is special teams. They are gonna hunt you down. Right. They are running as hard as they can. It's not like you caught a pick and you're running it in from a normal offensive play where guys may not be able to chase you because they're tired at the end of the half. These guys are fresh. So he even had it in his head he was going to slow down, and then the stop part to me. Even if you slow down, but the stop just to show out, you kind of get what you deserve on that point. It's kind of a silly mistake and one that really could have cost them the ball game.
Absolutely amazing that he did that. I don't know if he was thinking of doing a dance step over there. I don't know. Right. And then he got called for an interference later in the game as well. I mean, if they had lost that game, that dude, he would have had some. And
right off of that, they're going to run it in, and instead they jump off sides. Now you back it up, you settle for the field goal. I mean, all the things that ensued from there. I bet John Fox lost his mind in the locker room.
Well, look, it cost them 4 points in a game that goes to overtime. So it easily could have cost them the game. It doesn't wind up costing them the game. Let's keep working our way through those early games there. Okay. Atlanta, Detroit. All anyone will talk about is the way the game ends in the 8 seconds and the overturn and the 10-second runoff that winds up giving Atlanta the win. But I'll tell you what, I've watched all 3 of Detroit's games this year. I'm very impressed. I think the Lions are a good team. They're more than just Stafford and his fourth quarter comebacks now.
No, there's no doubt. And their defense is playing lights out. I mean, they're taking advantage of plays when they need to. Atlanta struggled, and I'll be honest. The 3 interceptions, but 2 were tips.
Yeah,
you got to get those down, right? Sanu in the red zone, those things got that's. And again, that game could have looked completely different had Atlanta just done what they should have done. But Detroit is legitimate on defense. Their corners, their DB play has been really, really good. You look at they are establishing the run game, even though it's not proficient or efficient yet. I love the fact that Jim Bob Cooter, who's their offensive coordinator, is calling the runs to keep defenses honest, where they just can't always play Stafford. That's going to pay benefits as the season moves on. But to your point, they're right in it. Could have won it, whatever that call, however that thing shakes out. But Detroit is a formidable opponent and one that has definitely improved. And you see it. Caldwell gets an extension. They're moving on.
I think the key thing you said there is they're not doing it just the old-fashioned way of Stafford throwing the ball 800 times.
That's right.
They are getting a bit of a running game. The defense is playing better. So they took Atlanta all the way to the end. Now they go to Minnesota, which just had a big win over Tampa Bay. In that division, that every week we keep changing how we decide. We keep saying, the Bears are out of it. Oh, by the way, the Bears could have beaten 2 of the top teams. They beat 1 and had the other one beat if players would have caught the ball. So who knows?
And you mentioned Minnesota. I mean, here's Tampa plays like this unbelievably good first game. Go up there. No Sam Bradford again. It's Case Keenum. And I will admit, I took the Buccaneers defense defense yesterday on DraftKings for exactly that reason, and I got just annihilated.
Yes.
I mean, how about Minnesota and Keenum in the performance yesterday?
It was unbelievable. I mean, when you turned it on to watch, we watch it all in the big room,
right.
So you're watching all these different games, and I kept thinking they were replays, and this isn't a replay. This is Keenum doing it again and again, and Diggs doing it again and again. They were just on fire, and defensively, obviously, they took advantage of Winston's mistakes. He does try to force balls at times into small windows, and that cost him yesterday. But Minnesota, again, with Cook and the way that he runs the ball, and the way that they can establish that, and if Keenum can kind of stay where he is. Yesterday was an anomaly. Let's be honest. He's not going to throw. It's not going to look like that every week.
Yeah, he threw 25 of 33 for 369 yards, no interceptions. Yeah.
That's not going to be a typical. That's not going to be a typical week. But if he can stay in the 200 yards, no interceptions type deal, this team's got a chance to win a bunch of games.
I agree. Dalvin Cook, his outside speed, the way they run that outside zone with that new old line, the 5 different guys in there. He had 97 yards rushing, 72 receiving.
Yes.
He's doing exactly what we thought he would do.
And as you look
on
their back end, on their defensive backfield with Rhodes, Newman, all the different guys, Harrison.
Yeah.
So as you're looking at those guys, that allows that defense to get 8 in the box, again, stopping the run of the other team. All arrows pointing up if they can keep that going.
Tell you what, Deshaun Watson played himself a good game yesterday in a place where rookies they go to professionally to die at Belichick and I was about to say in Foxborough, but at Bill Belichick and at Tom Brady, no rookie quarterback ever went in there and won a game. And if their coach had the courage to go for it on 4th and a half a yard yesterday, they would have beaten the Patriots in Foxborough.
Yeah, what a lights out performance. I mean, you just look at the whole way. And Bill O'Brien and the Texans staff, obviously with Mike Vrabel and Izzo, Larry Izzo, and I don't know how many other former Patriots are now down with the Houston Texans staff, but they got their number. I mean, they play these guys super tight every time they play them, and it was a heck of a football game. And to your point, there's a couple things I think O'Brien made mistakes. I think he owned them already. He's already said, look, I should have called a timeout. Right. I could have given ourselves another shot at this and gotten it closer. All of that is true. I think, when you look back, that was a mistake. But from the Texans, who in week 1 we were writing them off. I mean, right? We have a QB change. Through the first half, their offensive line can't block anybody. They can't get anything going. To how they looked yesterday, I mean, just think of the increase and the improvement they've had so far. This is, again, another team you can't write off, and which is crazy to think. But Deshaun Watson, man, he was electric. He's fun to watch. How many plays he extends with his legs, but then his ability to put the spin on the ball after that. He's looking good.
What do we make of the AFC West, where already we're saying, man, there's going to be 3 teams in it? We got Kansas City still undefeated. You have Denver that just destroys Dallas a week before and then goes to Buffalo. Is it give more kudos to Buffalo, or do we look at Denver? And then Oakland there's a good game and then there's basically getting, driven off the field, which is what happened to them last night in Washington. Yeah.
Listen, from the Broncos perspective, I'll go here. That's exactly what Trevor Siemian can't do to their football team, right? I mean, you're not going to win games that way. The Cowboys game, the whole deal. We don't have to have that, but we definitely cannot live with what you did yesterday. That's the issue for them. As long if you believe in the Trevor Siemian and what he's going to do, he has got to be a limited participant offensively if you're going to have opportunities to win games. So from that perspective, I'll move to there. Oakland, I was shocked.
Yeah,
they got manhandled. Now we can go, hey, West Coast coming east, whatever that looks like. But man, you could tell Washington, they came to play, and they came to play physically. It was not, and you look at all their pass rushing at the beginning of the game, 2 sacks in a row. They were all bull rushes. I mean, no one was even trying a move. They literally wanted to get underneath that massive Raider offensive line and drive them back, and they did it. And once they started that way, the Raiders just couldn't get back on the rails. Obviously Carr throwing the picks, that always hurts first play, and then, later on the first quarter. But as you're looking at this thing, I was shocked by that one. I mean, I did not see – it made the Redskins look – I mean, good heavens, man. Yeah. I mean, they looked like world beaters, and Oakland looked like they shouldn't have been able to win a game all season.
It was amazing. Oakland had 128 yards of total offense. Just absolutely
That's insane.
Stunning.
And with all the weapons they got.
All the weapons they have in that old line, it was amazing.
And the whole coming east thing, I mean, they've won, I believe, believe it's 8 straight games
Yeah,
at
they have
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. And this
the
is
early
night
games
game.
doesn't bother them. They play the night game on the East Coast, which you would think would matter less, and they get beaten up like that. And then the other one on the Denver thing was Simeon. I agree. You know how much I love him because he went to Northwestern. I think the second interception, he was trying to throw it out of bounds and didn't reach. I think it didn't get there.
Without question, that's still on him.
It's a terrible mistake. And then, that game goes a long way towards being decided by what I think is a terrible call. The fact that they call that on Von Miller for faking like one of these psych and not picking him up. That's a 4th down. They're going to have to punt the ball from midfield in a 1-score game. Instead, they get a fresh set of downs. They go down, run more clock, kick a field goal, and the game is over. They basically decide that game yesterday on something like that. Is that an unsportsmanlike? I mean, I get it. It's kind of goofy, but is that unsportsmanlike conduct? Should that be a 15-yard penalty?
I wouldn't have called that at all. I mean, you saw both guys look at one another and
they seem to be laughing.
Yes. And I no.
Under what in the rule book does it say you can't do that?
Yeah. To me, that went a little far.
Yeah. Here's my thing. You're not mandated to pick a guy up. So whether you guys reach it up or not, that's not he's not on your team. So what's the penalty by walking up?
Fake it.
Yeah, even if you fake it, but you could tell they were
calling it taunting. The rule officially that they broke was taunting.
Yeah,
is that taunting?
No. You could tell this was all in fun. This was not I could definitely see it if it was a taunt. You're in his face talking trash to him.
Right.
You go to put it down and then do it. But you could tell they were laughing. And the thing is the ref is right there. So you know he can hear it.
Absolutely.
And see it. It'd be like the three of us sitting right here. If y'all making fun of it, I could tell if it was in the spirit of, hey, we're having fun, or in the spirit of, hey, I'm rubbing this in your face. Yeah,
he didn't stand over the guy taunting like you're on the ground and then, pull his hand away.
I hate that call.
He was laughing along the way, and so was Tyrod. He was talking to him on the ground. I can't believe they made that call at that point.
And again, maybe if you want to argue anything that happens in the first quarter and the fourth quarter should be officiated the same, you want to make that call in the first quarter, that's
never
one
be
thing.
Called.
I agree with you.
Right.
But this is a critical situation in the game. It decides the game. Again, maybe Buffalo's going to stop them and they're going to win. Denver's offense struggled much of the day. But they had no chance. That play basically took them out of the game.
Exactly.
I hate that. And then how about the way Atlanta-Detroit ends? We talked about Detroit and how good they look, but let's circle all the way back to that. Did you – I think we all agree the call is the right one, that the knee is down, the ball's not across. It's a rule. So if the rule is the rule, we can't sit here and say they got it wrong. That is the rule.
Yeah, it is. And I thought about it last night. We were talking about it on SportsCenter afterwards. I'm not sure – So in football, we're taught situationally, right? Like you have to know down and distance, time, where you are, what you're trying to get accomplished, all of those things. Referees are no different. What call they're supposed to make, how that all works. My question would be, if he called them down, right? If he calls them down and you get the ball set, is that a better alternative? But the reality is you could be robbing them of a touchdown.
Right.
So it's an impossibility. Like as you look back at it, I'm not sure how that is ever fixed. And Caldwell handled it as well as you could, and so did Stafford. Hey, it's the rule. It is what it is. We should have won the game earlier. I get all that. That thing for me is tough when you're running clock and you don't even get another shot at that thing. That's a tough one. And I'm sure the rules committee will go back and look at it, but I don't know how you change it.
I don't know how you change it either, because even if they called them down and you were running, it's possible the booth still could have buzzed down and said, whoa, we're taking a look at that.
Right.
To which Atlanta would have lost their mind and say, wait a minute, you're letting them line up.
Yeah. So how do you fix it for both teams? It's in the rule book the way it is, and they officiated it correctly.
They did officiate it correctly.
But it is a hard way to lose. I can tell you that. I've been on the end of the back end of some of those.
Some thrown helmets in the locker room.
Yeah, you can guarantee that for sure.
That is Jeff Saturday, and you'll see and hear him all day long all over ESPN. Great work, Jeff. Great to see you as always. Thank you. Booger McFarland is on his way to talk about the best college football player in the world and more. Stay there.
Home isn't just a place. It's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance. So you can feel at home, wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT. Home. Safe home.
Mike and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, And the one and only Booger McFarland has made his way into our studio talking football and much, much more this morning. Hello, Booger McFarland.
Hello, Greeny Golic. How are you?
I'm doing well. No complaints.
I want to talk about the best college football player ever coming up here shortly.
Ever, huh? Good
I've
thing he
fallen
doesn't
in
go
love.
Prisoner of the moment.
You know me, I fall easy.
Man.
And I have fallen. I have seen the future, and his name is Saquon Barkley. But that's neither here nor there. I suppose on a morning like this, where we are doing a sports news program, this qualifies as sports news. So I'll just read it to you verbatim. The President of the United States has sent 3 tweets this morning relevant or relative to the subject we've been discussing here within the world of sports. 35 minutes ago, President Trump tweeted, "So proud of NASCAR and its supporters and fans. They won't put up with disrespecting our country or our flag. They said it loud and clear." Then 29 minutes ago, he tweeted, "Many people booed the players who kneeled yesterday, which was a small percentage of total," his words. "These are fans who demand respect for our flag." Then 22 minutes ago, he tweeted, "The issue of kneeling has nothing to do with race. It is about respect for our country, flag, and national anthem. NFL must respect this." So those are all from the president in the last half hour.
The first one, I mean, listen, if you read the quotes from the NASCAR owners, and they basically said, a few of them said they would fire any employees they had who knelt for the and another said, I wouldn't fire him. I'd have a talk with him on why I wouldn't want him to do that. But others said they would fire him flat out, put him on a bus, get him out of the country. That whole song and dance, you don't like it, get out of the country, a thing. And then as far as the last one was about it's not about that's where he gets it so wrong.
The issue of kneeling has nothing to do with race. It is about respect for our country,
everything
flag,
to do with inequality, racial, with police. But what these guys are talking about? Yeah. I mean, they say it time and time again. It's not nothing to do against the military. And I know there's people screaming at the TV or radio right now. You can say it all you want, but it is disrespecting the military. And if you have that thought process, that's fine. But the bottom line to me is the guys that are kneeling and sitting aren't in their minds. Right. They're not disrespecting the military. They're trying to bring awareness to something else.
That's the sad part about it. Let's understand how we got here and the reason why Colin Kaepernick first knelt down. He said, I'm kneeling down to protest the inequalities that blacks and minorities are treated wrong by the police. So if we understand the premise of where we started, now let's get to where we are now. Because where we are now, yesterday's kneeling, I think, encompassed that, but it also encompassed a little something else. It encompassed the fact that the President of the United States called out our fraternity.
Yeah, exactly.
He called out our fraternity and said, you guys, and to a certain point, your mothers, when he called them SOBs, you guys are disrespecting our country. And as Golic, I've heard you state, when you call out the fraternity is going to stand up. The fraternity is going to stand up. We may not agree inside the locker room, but when we walk outside the locker room, we are going to be united we stand. And I think when we understand the premise of why Colin Kaepernick knelt and why some people are kneeling now, the question is always posed, what would you do? It's been posed to me, and I heard Greeny pose it to you. What would you do? As a 39-year-old man now, I would like to think that I'm a lot smarter than I was at 25. And I try to put myself back at 25 when I was in the midst of my playing career and ask myself, what would I do? And the reason why I would do it. And I come up with this, is that if Colin Kaepernick is kneeling for inequalities against blacks and minorities and women, then how could I not take a knee? How could I not? Because a lot of people in this country before me fought for the equalities that I have now. A lot of people. When you talk about MLK, Rosa Parks, a lot of people, Golic, fought for those inequalities. And if they didn't fight for those inequalities, there's a possibility I wouldn't be sitting here now. And a lot of black athletes, a lot of minorities, a lot of people feel that way. So you have to pay respect for the people that fought for the cause of where you are now, because if you don't, you're disrespecting them. And I think a lot of players in the NFL, which is a majority black league, so when the president says this has nothing to do with race, he's kind of overlooking the factor of what the NFL is made up of. And a lot of people take disagreement with that. And so I just understand of where we started. And we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the initial purpose. We're solely focused on the flag and the military and the police and the first responders. And as you stated, they're split. Some say, yes, I fought for the rights that you can have those freedoms and you can protest the way you would like. That's what I fought for. Some say it's disrespectful. Okay, that aside, what about the fact that the initial thing we discussed was Colin Kaepernick speaking up because of the unfair and unethical treatment of blacks, minorities, and women? That's the focus that we're not having that I think we should have.
It's on such a smaller issue. It's like with Deflategate, it stopped being about the football on the field.
Exactly.
With Zeke Elliott, it stopped being about domestic violence
Yes.
procedure. Here, and that's the shame of this, that we don't lose sight of why there was kneeling in the first place. Let me continue that going back when you were 25.
Yeah.
Because as I said, when I'm 25, I'm 54 now, and like you at 39, still a lot younger than me, I would like to think I would be smarter and have more wisdom about it. You and I obviously come from different backgrounds. Yes. So while you say you would have hoped you would have knelt and understood that, I, as a white man, said I never would have knelt or sat for the national anthem the way I was brought up, my father being a Marine and my father-in-law being a Marine, that I wouldn't have, but I would have hoped, and I can't say with complete, clarity that I would have been completely understanding about it when I was 25 years old. I would have hoped that because, especially in Philly, that because if I did have players like Jerome Brown or Seth Joyner or Reggie White or Clyde Timmons, that we were such good friends, not just teammates, that I would have been a Chris Long and had my arm around them and supported, while not kneeling, supported what they did. So that's what I thought would go on in my locker room. And I said as well, before it all got situated, there may have been some hard feelings. There may have been some fights. So take it from the other side. What if there were white guys in your locker room who would not understand that you said, I'm going to kneel right now, and they would not accept that, how that could have gone?
Well, I hope that they would have respected my rights and freedoms. And most of my teammates, we all talked. We would have conversations. And the greatest thing about the locker room is that you can have civilized conversations and civilized disagreements. And guys can, whether tempers flare or not, guys.
Because there's a lot of A personalities.
No doubt about it. And so somebody will be the bigger person and somebody will listen. And I would have tried to explain to them why I feel the way that I do. My mother was born in 1955, okay, during a time where blacks didn't have every right that they have today. She explained that to me. Okay, so understand where I come from. And we're all different. We're all very different.
I don't come from that.
No doubt.
Right.
And when she explained that to me, I take great pride in the rights that we have now in America. I love this country. I love the rights and the freedoms that we've been given. When those rights and freedoms get violated, the way that Colin Kaepernick is fighting for them that have been violated against, blacks and whites and police brutality, somebody has to stand up. Now, I'm not saying I'm the guy that's going to tote the weight for every black person, every minority, or every woman in America. That's not my weight. But there's a little part I can do. And if a little part is me kneeling down to show that I support and I hope that the disrespect and the mistreatment of blacks and minorities will change, if me kneeling down helps that, then you know what? I'm all for it. And it has nothing to do, once again, the people who keep saying, well, this is all about the military, then you know what? You're not listening. And what happens when people want to focus on what they want to focus on and not listen to the primary subject of really what he's saying, that's what they do. And a lot of people are focusing on the flag. A lot of people are focusing on the military. And if we would just listen to what players are saying, listen in the beginning to what Colin Kaepernick said. Listen, and can we do something about that? And I think when the president of the United States goes and disrespects women by calling them SOBs, and Colin Kaepernick's mother comes out and says, well, I guess this is what I am. This has less to do about politics, man, and more to do with people. See, I don't care about your political affiliation. We've had Republican presidents in this country. We've had Democratic presidents, and the country has never been in a spot that it's in now. And it's because of how we treat and how we talk to people. This has nothing to do with politics. We keep using the word stick to sports. Well, what about sticking to people? Okay. What about sticking to the people that make this country up? Because we're people. And as people, there are certain things that we expect from each other. How you treat people, how you talk to people, the things that we were brought up on. That ain't politics, man. Has nothing to do with political affiliation. That has nothing to do with the tax cuts and small business. That has to do with how we treat people.
Oh, listen, you're 100%,
that's what that has to do with.
100% correct. We don't listen enough to one
exactly.
another. We have our views, and no matter what you say, you're wrong. You're wrong. Well, wait, no, you're wrong.
You're wrong, exactly.
And you're right. It's not about a political affiliation. Me and my wife were just discussing this yesterday, saying, why can't people just listen, try to understand the other side and not immediately go to the negative? That's what it seems to happen. Everybody immediately goes to the negative. Oh, wait, they're doing this? Well, that's horrible because of this, instead of saying, okay, why are they doing this? Yep. And instead of a tweet we get immediately, they're not intending to disrespect, but they are. Find another platform. Well, I mean, you're missing the entire point of why they're doing it in this platform to get the conversation going, and listen to the conversation and understand when they say we don't intend to disrespect the military. But for a lot of people, it's stuck in their head, and they can't get by that to listen to what the players are actually saying. And you're 100% correct. It's a people thing. Can we listen? Can we listen to one another and try and find solutions?
Correct. And you would like to think that the people who are leading us would have an interest in bringing people together, rather than a direct interest, certainly in action, in dividing us. Mm-hmm. And hence the use of the word divisive everywhere you saw yesterday. And I think that's the least you could say. That's the minimum that one could say about the comments that began all of this. And then with regard to the protest taking place during the national anthem, you could use many words to describe that. One of them is effective. Mm-hmm. It's something that can't be ignored. Yep. A lot of people want to ignore this because they want to spend their Sundays watching their football and not deal in all of these other issues, and I understand that. But that's the reason that this is such an effective means of protest, because it's something that people can't ignore. I'm not going to sit here and try and attach motivation to every person and why they are coming from where they come from. That's what I said earlier this morning, and one of the things about doing a 4-hour show is that you either repeat yourself constantly or you run the risk of many people not ever hearing where you're coming from on a topic. And you talked about being a little older, and Mike, you're a little older, and I'm a little older. Now, there's one of the things that I figured, I know for sure where I would have been if I had been a player, which obviously I was not, but if I was ever in this situation. I can't envision any circumstance in which I would kneel for the national anthem, but I'm 1,000% sure I would have supported my teammates who chose to do so. And exactly how I would have supported them, I don't know, but I would have found some way to do it. Because it just strikes me as simple. There's nothing could be more simple to me than the fact that you have the freedom in this country to express yourself in a peaceful manner, and they're doing so again in what I think is an extremely effective manner. But if there's one thing I'm trying to get out of the business of doing in my own mind is telling other people how they should feel about things. Right. And that's what I'm here. Well, you're wrong. But no, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong in the same way you're not wrong. Yep. You're entitled to feel however it is you feel about this. And so am I. Now let's go forward from here. Now let's go forward from here. Even if the people occupying some of the highest offices in this country have chosen not to act as though we should all have a right to feel the way we feel, even if they have chosen to make a point of trying as hard as they can to divide us along topics such as these. Let's try not to fall for that. Yeah. Let's try and do this thing together. Dale Earnhardt Jr. tweeted, "All Americans are granted rights to peaceful protests. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." That's a quote attached to JFK. That's this morning. That's Dale Earnhardt Jr. Mm-hmm. So I guess not everyone in NASCAR feels the same way either. Booger McFarland is here in studio with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. All right, trying to find a balance this morning, and there was no sticking to sports this morning because this is sports. But let's move to the on-the-field part of sports. Yep. And I'm going to try and make a statement at the risk of, I'm not going to overstate anything.
You do overstate.
I don't do that. You know me. I don't do that. I just sit here and I make simple observations. Saquon Barkley is the greatest football player that ever put on a uniform. I don't know that I've seen a performance, and I know this dude. Booger, yeah, come on! You're sitting in that studio. I'm watching you at halftime. Yeah. I'm looking to look at your face. I could say I watched the two games I saw all of on Saturday. I saw the Oklahoma State game, which they deserved to lose 10 different ways, and you and I were texting back and forth about it. But let's start with Saquon Barkley. If I were to say he's the best running back in college football of the recent vintage, let's not go back to Earl Campbell and people like that, but of the recent really great backs in football, be they Todd Gurley, be they Ezekiel Elliott, be they Leonard Fournette, and some of the others. When I say I watch this kid, I think he's the best of the group. Is that an overreaction?
He's the best since Barry Sanders, and here's why. Because if you want to compare him to Gurley and Leonard Fournette, Barry Sanders is the best. And here's why. Because if you want to compare him to Gurley and Leonard Fournette, and guys like that. Look at his balance. Look at his power. Look at his explosion, his ability to burst, his ability to accelerate, his unselfishness, his ability to return kicks, his ability to catch out of the backfield, his ability to block. He does everything at an exceptional level. And the number one thing that he does that I love is he competes. He competes at the position like a defensive player, Mike, like people that we grew up playing with. And he's unselfish. You watch the last play of the Iowa game. It's 4th down. It's going to be a walk-off.
Yeah.
And he steps up and picks up a blitzing linebacker. That tells me everything I need to know about that kid. Best player on the team, maybe the best player in the country. I think he is. And he said, you know what? If this is what I need to do for us to win, pick up this blitzing linebacker, I'll do it. I think he's the best running back that we've seen in college football since Barry Sanders because of everything that he combines, everything he puts together. He's a little bit faster and a little bit more explosive, better acceleration than Ezekiel Elliott. He has better lateral movement. He's a better pass catcher than Leonard Fournette. Todd Gurley may be the closest. I think he's a little bit more physical than Todd Gurley, and the acceleration is better. So I think we can compare him to different backs, but I think the closest comparison we've seen is Barry Sanders.
I'd probably go just a little bit later than that. I'd probably say Reggie Bush. I thought Reggie Bush was
bigger, though.
No, he's definitely bigger.
Yeah.
Well, Barry Sanders was tiny. Saquon's way bigger than Barry. I would say because Reggie Bush catching the ball in the backfield. Reggie Bush and his moves, his quickness to making people avoid, his ability to return if he needed to. That's where the comparison I would make. Either way, he is what I like about his running is his subtle movements. They look so subtle, yet it makes people miss. Yeah. And then to me, he's got another gear.
Yes.
He's got another gear when, I made the move, made you miss, and now I can restart. I can shift gears fast enough and outrun all of you and drop a shoulder if I need to. He's something else. I agree. I think he's the best player in the country. If a quarterback doesn't win the Heisman, I think he'll be right in line to win it. Now that'll go along with how well they're doing as a team too. As we know,
think he's going to win the Heisman. If you look at the big quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson lost his big game. Yeah. Mason Rudolph just lost a
Baker Mayfield had him. Baker Mayfield, last I checked, is the odds-on favorite. So, no,
right now Barkley has replaced him.
Yeah. Barkley has replaced him.
I think the top two right now are Baker Mayfield and Barkley. Baker has that moment going into Columbus, that win, how he performed. Mm-hmm. Saquon Barkley will get his moment down the road.
Yeah, they've still got, obviously, Ohio State and Michigan and all those games still to come. And we'll see. Sometimes, fairly or unfairly, they put a little more on the winning and the losing on the quarterback than they do on the running back. The running back just has to be spectacular.
Oh, exactly.
My point is, I think he could, if Penn State loses a game, and they're likely to. I mean, it's a tough schedule, obviously. So, will someone come out of that conference unbeaten? They might. But certainly Penn State might lose a game somewhere along the line. If Barkley's numbers continue to be what they've been,
ridiculous,
I think he's going to wind up winning the Heisman.
Well, no doubt. And I think the quarterbacks that have fallen off, Sam Darnold, he's not playing very well this year. And I know.
I always liked the way he threw the ball, but, man, some of the decisions he makes, it blows my mind.
Playing quarterback is about decision-making.
Yes.
And his decision-making this year has been terrible. And
I've been really surprised.
It's as almost he's sitting back and he's saying, you know what? I can take the simple throw, but I can win the Heisman with that throw. And he's trying to win the Heisman with every throw. There are plays, and we'll do a couple of them later on SportsCenter, where he's got the running back in the flat wide open for a 10-yard gain. He's trying to throw the deep dig at 25, and it's high. It's getting picked off. Like, he's starting to feel
I'm with you.
The pressure of guys showing up at the game with Sam Darnold Jets jerseys on, which, by the way, I hope he doesn't go to the Jets.
I know.
Because Josh McCown is playing so well right now. Hopefully, he'll settle down and just go back to the way that he was playing last year.
And so because we've seen it, I think he can. Hopefully he will. The kid who I think throws the nicest ball might be Rosen from UCLA. I like the way he throws it. Let's not discount Allen just yet. Josh Allen, Wyoming, who lost all his receivers and his running back last year and all that.
He's not going to win the Heisman.
No. I don't care about the Heisman. Okay. I'm talking about the next level. I could care
We're talking
less
about the Jets quarterback.
I could care less about the Heisman,
right
which is a ridiculous award in my eyes, Heisman.
Golic hates it.
Heisman, just say a quarterback or running back award. That's all it is.
Well, it is.
So I don't care about that. I'm talking about, like, the next level.
At Mike and Mike, we're brought to you you by Dollar Shave Club. Upgrade to shaving with a fresh blade whenever you want for a fraction of the price. Join DollarShaveClub.com today. Quickly on the Penn State schedule, we talked about it. After they lose in Evanston, then they go back-to-back weeks against Michigan and Ohio State. They're home Michigan Saturday, October 21st, and they're at Ohio State the following weekend, Saturday, October 28th. The rest of their schedule looks like games they should win out after that. So, again, they'll absorb the one loss at Northwestern, and then we'll see. They could overcome that if they sweep Michigan and Ohio State.
And you're saying that with a serious look on your face.
Did you see what Duke did to Northwestern?
You're looking right. I'm looking right at you. And listen, we bounced back with a huge performance against Nevada. And all will. But no, I'm sorry. The Nevada was the first game against Bowling Green. We had a week off. And go up into Wisconsin, knock off those guys in Madison, and then everything will be just rolling along a little bit. We got back-to-back weeks against Wisconsin and Penn State, and then the country will know.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
All right, a little bit of the Twitter reaction. Jeremiah tweets, does this league-wide unified protest lift the unofficial blacklisting of Colin Kaepernick? Answer to that is a big no.
Nope.
Colin Kaepernick is not being blackballed by all of those players down there with their arms interlocked around each other, or any of those owners, some of whom released heartfelt statements over the weekend, and others of whom I thought did what they felt they needed to do, and in some cases did the absolute bare minimum. But the fact remains that Colin Kaepernick does not have a job and is the best quarterback ever to not have a job in the NFL at this time, and there is one and only one reason for that. Cramsman tweets, Booger is so right on. Folks are missing the point of the kneeling protest and focusing on the protest itself.
That's what just blows my mind. You can feel they're disrespecting the military, even if you feel that way, and the players say they aren't. Still, can't we look past that and say, okay, what are they talking about? Why do we just have to be, they're disrespecting the military, I don't want to hear what they have to say. Listen a little bit. Just listen. It's a people thing here to listen to one another.
You know, if the president came out and said one thing, like a lot of this could be quelled and calmed down. You know what? Our police force do a tremendous job around the country. Are they all doing ethical things? Some are not. And our mission is to make sure that 100% of our police force are treating people equal. If he said that, I don't think anybody have any issues whatsoever. Because that's the point. That's the point of everything that started with Colin Kaepernick. I think that's the point that's been missed, because a lot of people don't want to focus on that. They want to deter the attention towards something that they can stand on, that they can grandstand. This is the flag and this is the country. And once again, I'll speak for every NFL player out there. We love this country. This country has afforded us so many inalienable rights that we can't even count them all. But to say that it's perfect would also be wrong.
That's exactly right. As I said, the flag stands for a lot of things to different people. We all love this country, but it's not a perfect country. Yep. And those guys kneeling down feel there's some parts of it that need work. And that's all they're saying is listen to this. But too many people just say you're disrespecting the military. I don't care what you say, so I'm not listening to anything you have to say. And that the 54-year-old me has a hard time with that, of listening. Whereas as I admitted, the 25-year-old me, I'm not sure how I would have reacted, because I was a lot dumber then. Yeah. Some would say maybe now, but still.
Yeah. If the president had said, I personally, as an American citizen, disagree with kneeling during the anthem. I would like to see these players find a different means of expressing their frustration, or any other phrase to those effect. This would not have been what it had turned into. But when you are making comments that are designed specifically to get the reaction that this has gotten for any number of reasons, none of which address the problems that began the protests, then this is what you get. You get exactly what you're looking for, which is exactly what has happened. Where it goes from here, I really don't have any idea. But I would not expect it to get better. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We are living in a reality show that has actual consequences. All right, let's just move back to the field of play here. The Oklahoma State thing, we were joking around about it during a break. And then I want to get Booger's thoughts on the NFL. But Oklahoma State was a team that all of a sudden we were thinking, ooh, this is a team with a chance to win the national championship. Mm-hmm. And Mason Rudolph has a chance to win the Heisman Trophy and all that, and they run up against TCU. Yeah. And I tell you what, TCU on the road beat them every which way. Oklahoma State almost came back and won that game, and if they had, kudos to them. Yeah. But it sure would not have been because they looked like the better team. TCU played a great game that day.
There's only been one team that's had more number one defenses in the country than TCU, right? It's been Alabama.
No doubt. And Gary Patterson is tremendous. He's a defensive genius. Doesn't get nearly enough credit down there in Fort Worth. What they did, they turned Oklahoma State over 4 times. They controlled the football with Darius Anderson on the ground. And Kenny Hill, I'm not sure if he still has that patent. He got the patent while he was at A&M Trill.
Right, Trill, yeah.
Yeah, Kenny Trill Hill. Well, the Trill showed back up on Saturday, and he performed at an outstanding rate. They beat Oklahoma State. It wasn't a fluke. Mason Rudolph made some very, very poor decisions and kind of fell in line with some of the other top quarterbacks around the country. For as much as we laud them for their physical assets, their decision-making has been lacking this year of a lot of the top quarterbacks. But you got to give TCU a lot of credit.
Absolutely,
and now,
right.
November the 11th, TCU goes to Oklahoma to take on Baker Mayfield and the Sooners. That game right there has the potential to be the showdown before the Big 12 championship.
Sure does. And again, what Booger said there at the end is something we haven't been used to hearing before the Big 12 championship game, of which there now is one, finally, and there needed to be one, so your conference didn't keep getting left out of the playoffs and with the way they're playing right now. But that game, what Oklahoma State letting anyone other than Mason Rudolph throw a pass in a critical situation was one of the most mind-blowing things to me I've ever
Coaches
seen.
outthink themselves. You know that.
I am amazed at that, to do a little swing pass.
We got him.
I don't even know where to begin when I saw it, because you could see what was coming.
Yeah.
Because it was a backward pass.
Yes.
So you saw, I literally was sitting there going, oh, my God, he's going to throw it. And he just caught it and lofted that thing to where we were talking about, we know what happens in practice during the week with the prep team, the show team that's working against the number one offense. You tell that DB, hey, bite up on that.
Yeah.
So it's a successful play. Yeah. Bite up. It doesn't work that way when you're playing an opponent. They're not biting up on it when they see what's going on. And, I can't believe that they did that.
Well, and if you're TCU, here's the one thing that you have to be very, very excited about. It's how that defense played. Yeah. More importantly, the turnovers that you got. And if you're Mike Gundy, you have to start to wonder. You've had great offenses. You've had some very successful teams, but you always have that kind of one hiccup here and there throughout the season. He traditionally wins 9 or 10 games, but he also has that one or two hiccups throughout the season, and you just wonder why. So I think a lot of people, especially the guy whose name is on the stadium, T-Bone Pickens, who he and the head coach don't necessarily get along. I'm pretty sure they're going to have some very interesting conversations over the next couple months.
Mike and Mike, Booger McFarland in our studio. We are presented by Progressive Insurance, our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line to the NFL. You played a lot of your career in Tampa. You make your home in Tampa. I put a lot of hopes in Tampa as the football team this year, and I picked them as my defense on DraftKings this weekend, and they went up to Minnesota. And Booger, what the heck happened?
A lot of guys hurt. I think it was 5 starters that didn't play. Jerry McCoy got hurt during the game. So at one point during the game, they were playing defense without 6 of their starting 11. That being said, offensively, Jameis Winston, once again, forcing some throws. The one thing that will stop him from being a superstar, Greeny, is his decision-making and wanting to make the big play and forcing the football down the field. He forced a lot of balls yesterday. 3 of them got picked. And I think Tampa Bay – this team you're seeing now is not the Tampa Bay team you're going to see midseason. Doug Martin will be back in a couple of weeks. Now you get a running game going. Teams have to play them differently from a defensive standpoint because as much effort as Jacquizz Rodgers gives you, he's not a guy you can give it to consistently 20 times a game. And so now you're basically looking at a team that is a passing football team right now, and everybody knows it because they're not afraid of the running game. Well, that changes when Doug Martin gets back. That changes when the defense gets healthy. So if they can they can survive until they get to midseason, get to 4-4, 5-3, I think they'll make their run in the second half of the season when that team becomes healthy and that team becomes whole.
Ran the ball just 9 times in that game. Now, they were taken out of it pretty early, down 21-3 at halftime. You kind of go out of your game plan a little bit. But the same thing that affects Jameis was from college is he forces the ball at times. But I've always said, Booger, give me a guy that goes too far and let me bring him back a little bit than a guy that doesn't do enough. Right. So I'll always try and work with that guy, but at some point he's got to weed that out of his system through the process of learning and playing and reps to say, okay, I got to be careful just how much I force the ball.
Well, quarterbacks love their arm.
Yeah.
I mean, quarterbacks like to think that they can make every throw and get it in every tight window. Brett Favre was a great example of that. I think Jameis will grow out of that. He's too good of a quarterback, too good of a person down there in Tampa. I think Dirk Cutter's the best thing to happen to him because Dirk Cutter coaches him the way we got coached on defense. When we make a mistake, Dirk Cutter doesn't walk up, hey, it's going to be okay. No, you can't make that throw. And I mean, he gives him some choice words. We heard that on Hard Knocks. So I think he's being coached the right way by Dirk Cutter. And I think Jameis will be okay, but he's got to stop turning the football over so much.
Mike and Mike were brought to you by Upside. Now save big on travel. Get a big gift card with every trip you buy. You'll love Upside.com. That's Upside.com. Jalen Rose on the way. Louis Riddick on the way. Booger McFarland stays here. Busy morning working on a Monday with Mike and Mike. We'll be right back. And there's a ton of Twitter reaction flying in on so many different things, and I hope that we have been over 18 years, and I hope that each of us continues to be, and Booger here with us now as well. A place where people who have different opinions and feel strongly, in fact, in different ways, can come together and have a conversation. Yeah. And I will listen to you, and maybe I'll learn something from you, and hopefully you'll listen to me, and maybe you'll learn something from me. And it doesn't mean that I'll change your mind or you'll change mine, but we can have a conversation. But I think there's one thing that is clear, and that is if the people at the very, very top, the people who have the loudest voices, are using those voices and all the means connected to them, all the means available to them, to purposely divide the masses further, then you're getting into a very dangerous area. And this is something that has not been addressed as much in the dialogue, and I understand why, because people are reacting specifically to what was said, and I get that. But once that dies down, once as we move on from everything, once the initial reaction to what was said dies down, then I think what we must come to next is, are we going to get to a place where the people with the loudest voices in America, are we ever going to get to that place, are actually using them to try to bring people together rather than try to push them farther apart, which is a very dangerous circumstance, and it is where we are right now. All right, Booger, in the few minutes left that we have you, around the NFL we go. What else jumped out at you? We talked about Tampa getting obliterated by Minnesota. We had a lot of really good games yesterday. What jumped off the page at you?
Well, for me, it was last night watching the Oakland Raiders. You know, we've kind of awarded them as being the next team that's going to take that huge step, and we felt they would have taken a step last year if Derek Carr didn't get hurt. I thought it was a flat performance last night to come on the road. They had been 8-0 in the Eastern time zone. They didn't play well. And more importantly, if you look at how it happened, their offensive line, who they think is the best offensive line right there with the Cowboys, got obliterated. I mean, they were getting walked back, pushed into the lap of the quarterback. Derek Carr looked very uncomfortable. And beast mode was brought there to bring an attitude. And I didn't see the attitude last night. And for me, that's alarming. Number two, the New York Giants. You know, for as much as McAdoo wants to talk about his quarterback and point out his quarterback, the one thing a lot of people, and Golic, you know this, and this gets very technical, since he took over and became an OC, I think it's like 90% of the time he runs his plays out of the same exact formation. 3 wide receivers. They don't run the football a lot. Well, Greeny, I can put it plain and simple. If you do one thing all the time, it makes it so easy for a defense to get ready for you. So you're talking about your quarterback, and you're blaming your quarterback and saying that he's got to do better. But what about you doing better as an offensive coordinator? You know, we talk about all these weapons that the New York Giants have. We talk about Odell and Marshall and everything, and it's going to be a high-flying show. Well, now it comes to the coach. Can the coach put the players in position to succeed? I don't think McAdoo is doing a good enough job of doing that. And therefore, you look at their record at 0-3, and it's going to continue. As good as Eli is, a 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback, he cannot be Peyton. He can't throw it 50 times and do it by himself. And so I think McAdoo is doing a very, very poor job of putting the Giants in position to win.
So in the AFC, we always said New England, we give them the benefit of the doubt that they're at the top, and we've talked about the 2 teams that we think can maybe stick with them this year is Pittsburgh and Oakland. Well, Pittsburgh loses to Chicago in overtime, and Oakland gets dismantled last night. Who's next? I guess the easy thing would be Kansas City. So let's take them out because they're where else do we go in the AFC that we think at this point we say, you know what, maybe there's something there. Because Kansas City is one of those teams.
I'm going to start with defense. And we can talk about offense all we want to. Defense still wins championships. And I know that's an easy slogan, but if you look at how the NFL and how college football has performed, and I think you have to start with Denver. At Denver, and Greeny's guy, Trevor Siemian, has been really, really good. He didn't play great yesterday.
No.
Their defense has been as consistent as anybody's defense over the last 2 seasons. So I'm always going to go with Denver in their defense. Kansas City, obviously, it doesn't sound trendy right now, but Houston knows how to play New England. They know how to play them. They're not afraid of them. They should have won the game yesterday.
Half a yard could have won.
Go for it on 4th down.
Exactly. So as Deshaun Watson develops throughout the season, it'll be interesting if they get in the tournament. I don't care where the game is, and Houston plays New England. A lot of people are going to favor Houston in that game because of what they can do defensively with Clowney, Watt, Merciless. So I think one of those 3 teams will be the biggest challenge. When you talk about Denver, Kansas City, Oakland, if their offense can get back on track, in Houston, I think those teams will be the one that challenge New England.
What did you make of that decision? Because this is, for those of you who didn't see it, Houston has a 4th and about a half a yard to go in chip shot field goal range with 2 minutes and change left in a 2-point game. They have a 2-point lead. Mm-hmm. Go for it. New England, I believe at that point, had 1 timeout. I'm doing this from memory. I believe New England had 1 timeout remaining. So if you go for it and you get it, you might be able to run the clock out. Right. Even if you don't, you're going to run it way down. You may score a touchdown that ends it. You're going to win the game, very likely, if you make that half yard. If you don't make it, you're giving the ball back to Brady, and all he needs is a field goal rather than giving it to him where a touchdown still wins the game with well over 2 minutes. Me, I'm not putting that ball in Tom Brady's hands if I can avoid it with a chance to beat me no matter what I do. What did you think of the decision, and what do you think the defensive players on that team thought of that decision?
I thought it was a good decision, and here's why. If you look at the history of Houston against Tom Brady, they've had a lot of success.
Defensively,
when you can turn your game over, like in Tampa, and I'm sure it's the same way in Philadelphia, our coaches always told us, if I give the defense the ball with the lead late in the game, we got one job: close them out. We're the closer. If you think your defense is that good, you are the closer. You are Mariano Rivera. So I love the decision, especially early in the season. Now, if this were game 12 or 13, I think Bill O'Brien would have put forth a different decision. I think maybe he goes for it because circumstances would have been different. Early in the season, you're developing this team. You're trying to get an identity. You're going to be built around this defense with the young quarterback. I like the decision based on the game number that it was in the season. And if your defense is who we think they are, which is a very good defense, turn it over to them. Let it go. Everybody says, because now people think offensively so much. Everybody's like, keep the offense on the field. Let's score 50 points. That's the day and age we are in football. But understand, we grew up in a different area where defense dominated, and you turned your game over to your defense, and you won a loss with them.
Don't turn the ball over to Tom Brady. There's a very hard, fast rule that I would follow in football, and that is, if you can keep Tom Brady from beating you, do that.
He's crushed you so many times with the Jets.
He's crushed everybody.
I think you're just gun shadow.
By the way, for those that think Tom Brady is, a little too old to be doing what he's doing,
he's old.
Yeah,
he's on pace for 5,824 passing yards.
Okay.
42 touchdowns.
Right.
And no interceptions.
Is that good?
That's pretty good.
Oh, now those good numbers?
Those are great numbers.
And he's 40.
Somebody send those numbers to Max Kellerman, please. Because Max said he was done. So once he got to this number, it was over.
It's like, can he throw touchdown? Like they say, can you golf your age? Can he throw touchdowns to his age?
Yeah. Will he reach it? Yeah. Can he shoot his age as a quarterback? Booger, terrific as always. Thank you so much. We'll talk at some point further, perhaps later in this week. Jalen Rose has made his way in our studio. We have a lot to get to with him, so don't miss it. Jalen and Louis Riddick in the next hour. Stay there. Mike and Mike.
Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. Whether you're at home, your business, or online, ADT helps keep you safe. With security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling. ADT, home, safe home.
Dwayne Wade is a free agent. Carmelo Anthony traded over the weekend. Fabulous, furious finishes to the early games yesterday. The best we've seen in the NFL in 2 years, but these, of course, are not normal circumstances, and you don't need us to explain the reasons why. We've been talking all morning long, trying to find a balance in our conversation between the action that has taken place on the field And we need to get into some of the action that took place in boardrooms, trade rooms, conference calls, wherever it is these deals get done in the NBA yesterday. And then, of course, all the events surrounding the President of the United States and his words about the world of sports, both football and basketball. Jalen Rose is here to provide insight into all of that and much more. Good morning, Jalen.
Morning, gentlemen.
So you have to provide insight, he said.
Absolutely. Got to
Okay.
get the people what they want.
All right.
That's the goal. Jalen, a newly minted member of the State of Michigan's Hall of Fame.
That's pretty
I saw
impressive.
That on
Yes,
Twitter.
indeed.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate the love.
Nice job. Nice job out of you.
That's for the work that you've done with your school there
Oh,
as much
that's-
as it is anything else. Okay, let's start with some of the basketball because we haven't done it at all this morning. And so let's get a little insight into that, and then we'll work our way towards other matters. Let's start with Carmelo Anthony because it feels like we waited forever for that trade to take place. And then considering all of the other circumstances that were going on Saturday when the president was tweeting at the Warriors that they were uninvited to the White House, it almost became as though the trade of a future Hall of Famer became like secondary news, and for understandable reasons. But as we look at all the circumstances here, Carmelo on Oklahoma City, you put him together with George and with Russell Westbrook. Where in your mind does that put the Thunder right now in the pecking order in the NBA's Western Conference?
With Russell Westbrook averaging a triple-double and winning MVP, the Oklahoma City Thunder, though recently they lost KD and obviously they lost James Harden, were still a playoff team. But once they got there, they were clearly overmatched because he didn't have the supporting cast to take them to the next level. Adding these two players and still keeping the base of their roster in tow, in particular Adams, I think they're a top 4 team in the Western Conference. I truly do. Paul George is going to have a lot to prove because while in Indiana he became an all-star player, played at an all-NBA level. It's going to be his second year off a horrific injury that he's overcome. I think that team is going to be so exciting to watch. How about Sam Presti, their general manager?
Yeah.
How he continues to remix his roster, overcome adversity, ignore what Kevin Durant had to say on his burner Twitter account, and still find ways to make mega deals happen, and bringing Carmelo Anthony to town is just that.
The other side of that, as I look at it, you see Kyrie going to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what went on there? Then you see Chris Paul, obviously, to Houston, and George to Oklahoma City now where Carmelo goes, and then Dwayne Wade. All that being said, the one constant, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we can change is, but Golden State's still the best team, and nobody, while they look better to beat them, is going to beat them. So it almost seems like, while most of this movement, we were like, wow, look at this future Hall of Famer moving here, and this star moving here, and this guy moving here. Where are we? Cleveland, Golden State, back in the finals again. Would you agree?
I agree, but the NBA's on fire right now.
I agree with that.
And if they were at a stoplight with the NFL, the NBA pulled off in a Lamborghini while the NFL is driving a minivan. Like, the NBA is that deal. And I agree with you, Golic. While the Golden State Warriors, when they have 4 All-Stars on their team, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson are the favorites, the Cleveland Cavaliers still have LeBron James and basically a retooled roster that's going to make them the class of the Eastern Conference. Man, the league still has intrigue, though. When you have the remote control in your hand, it's like, wow, Boston has Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. Houston has CP3 and James Harden. We just talked about the deal that Oklahoma City was able to capture. There's so much intrigue going on in the league. It's going to be fantastic to watch.
Is the other, again, with that, because I agree with you, completely agree with you, but what about also, don't you almost expect next year Chris Paul will be on another team, Paul George will be on another team, maybe Carmelo, maybe even LeBron, way everybody's talking that the whole thing's going to rearrange again?
It could, but as you guys know, sports truly happens in dog years. There's so many things that can take place over the next 12 months that it's hard to quantify what truly will take place. And there's still a part of me, while I was one of the first people to come out and not only talk about Cantor going to the Knicks, but also talk about LeBron possibly leaving Cleveland. That's not necessarily a foregone conclusion because I don't know if he wants those Western Conference problems. If you truly look at what's taking place in the West from top to bottom, it's a gauntlet to get out of there. He's owned the Eastern Conference 7 straight years. So worst case scenario, he knows that he's going to get to the conference finals, maybe the NBA finals, and at that point, anything can happen when you're the best player in the game.
All right, so I want to go back to the first thing you said, which is this makes OKC a top 4 team in the Western Conference. If they can defend, I'm not sure it doesn't make them the second best team in the Western Conference. I mean, Westbrook, I believe, regardless of what anybody's record was, when KD was there, they were the second best team in the conference. They had the best chance to beat Golden State, and they had them on the ropes, as has been covered a million times, 3-1 up in that series and didn't get it done, and KD goes. I understand you're putting Houston and San Antonio, obviously, are the 2 teams you're talking about ahead of them right now. And I know Houston, with the way they play and adding Chris Paul, which I think will be a nice addition. But if you've got George on the perimeter right now to go around, no one stops Kevin Durant, but someone out there who plays as good a defense out there with his size and his length and everything else as he does. Carmelo is another place to go get buckets anytime you want them. And Westbrook is Westbrook. If they maybe a little tinkering here or there, they continue to put stuff around. They got the big in the middle. I think if you're looking at one of those teams and say, which one of them would you give up the best puncher's chance against Golden State in a 7-game series, I think I would take Oklahoma City.
I'm rolling with you. Based on the balance you just talked about, Houston still has to figure out what they're going to do at the power forward and center position consistently to get production and, more importantly, defense once the playoffs come. San Antonio Spurs, they have Kawhi Leonard and Coach Pop. Those are 2 things we know that they're going to get 50 to 55 wins just waking up in the morning.
Right.
Now, once they get to the playoffs, is LaMarcus Aldridge and whoever else that plays up front going to consistently get them productivity? But I totally agree with you and appreciate how OKC has continued to reinvent itself, and now all of a sudden they're a contending type team. And I appreciate that level of balance, though the Golden State Warriors and the Cavs have become outliers in their conference that we now have in the NBA.
Okay, let's go back to something that's really important there. I don't care if Oklahoma City finishes second, because Golden State's still the cream of the crop there, and they're going to win. You said you don't think it's a foregone conclusion now LeBron is leaving Cleveland. I've been saying this forever now, that why would he go to the West? The whole notion of him playing with his banana boat friends just so he can play with his banana boat friends. Last I checked, he likes the history, and he likes the fact he's going to the finals every single year. Why would he leave Cleveland?
And also, if you're LeBron James, you got to look at it like this. The Cleveland Cavaliers have a squad. I think what gets lost is we want to dumb down the journey and talk about the fast forward to the finals, and people haven't truly looked at the Cleveland Cavaliers roster. They just added Isaiah Thomas. When he comes back from a hip injury, for those who haven't been paying attention, he almost averaged 30 points last year.
Yeah.
Okay, they still have JR at the shooting guard position, a knockdown 3-point shooter. They still re-signed Kyle Korver. They have Tristan inside. They brought along Derrick Rose. They still have Kevin Love, who gets overlooked in this entire dynamic. I think he's going to be close to an 18-11 guy this season. So when you put that with LeBron James and you have all of the things he has going for himself, why give that up unless you're going to be on a super team? So if LeBron leaves, this is what you pay attention to. Where's the next super team? Mm-hmm. Is an all-star level player, like you mentioned, that isn't long-term with this team, now going to go to a team, say the Los Angeles Lakers? You said Paul George. Russell Westbrook hasn't signed. What's going to happen with DeMarcus Cousins? If these players now shake loose to one of those teams, then follow the tea leaves and LeBron possibly ends up there. But if he's not playing for a super team, he's not bouncing.
Couple of quick thoughts on that. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Jalen Rose is with us, our guest on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We'll get to a million other things coming up. But you mentioned Sam Presti, the job he's done in Oklahoma City. You look at the trades of big stars and all the different things that have happened. He has managed to turn in the last month or whatever it was, 6 weeks. He has managed to turn Doug McDermott, Enes Kanter, Victor Oladipo, and Arvydas Sabonis' son into Paul George and Carmelo Anthony. Okay? That's what he did. So that is remarkable what he's done in OKC. If they're hanging on by a thread, he's not going down without a fight. So I give him all the credit in the world. The other piece in this is, oh, by the way, Dwayne Wade is a free agent now. For those of you waking up this morning and hadn't heard the news, Wade works out a buyout with the Bulls. He leaves $8 million on the table, and he goes where he wants. Does he go to Cleveland and play with his longtime good friend LeBron? Does he go to Oklahoma City? Could Dwayne Wade at this stage, at 35 years old, with all the moxie and the savvy and the skill he still has, could he be one who could tilt the bounds of power a little bit in the West based upon where he goes?
Any contending team would want Dwayne Wade on their roster, a 3-time champion. As you noted, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to get bought out by the Chicago Bulls because they're going in different directions at this point. But the one thing no one isn't discussing is that all of the teams you just described, if he signs with those squads, he's going to be a substitute. He won't be a starter anymore. And so you have to look at when he goes to a squad, if he's now going to be that boost off the bench that they really need. He could provide that in OKC, which on paper, I would like him to go there just because it's more sexy when you cover in the game. But the reality of it is he'll be in Cleveland with his good friend LeBron James. And how things come full circle, LeBron actually left Miami, looked at Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and said, you know what? Our time of winning championships are probably ended, so I'm going to go to Cleveland and play with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. Now come full circle, Dwayne Wade does, in my opinion, join the Cleveland Cavaliers.
How does a player deal with that? A guy who's been a star, a Hall of Famer, starter his whole career, and all of a sudden say you're relegated to coming off the bench and we need you to be that spark? How does that happen?
Longevity comes with reinventing yourself. Look at an artist like Jay-Z or Puffy or players that played a long time in whatever sport or career endeavor. You have to humble yourself, accept a different role, but also be real that you can still be productive at what you're being asked to do and not allow your ego to say, I'm only going to go to a team that makes me a starter. Especially at this point of his career, you don't want to put those miles on your body. You still want to be fairly fresh once the playoffs come. And he understands getting bought out by the Bulls gives him a new lease on life. And I think that ends up being a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
All right, we are Mike and Mike, and Jalen Rose is here in our studio. He is giving us the Straight Talk, which is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. I don't remember exactly what day you said it, but I remember when you said it. Some months ago. I believe it was shortly after the inauguration of President Trump, but I don't recall exactly when you said it.
I'll tell you when I said.
When did you say it?
NBA and NFL players will deny the opportunity to attend the White House under the Trump presidency. And I took a lot of crap for it. And you guys know how this industry works. Sometimes it's good when you're breaking news and you become a headline, and sometimes it isn't. And that was one of those days where people was questioning what I had to say about the topic. It was November of 2016 when I said it. Now you fast forward, it's actually happening right in front of us.
And then, so fast forward to this past Saturday.
Yes.
And I can't find the tweet now. I'm going through it and through his Twitter feed because there's a million things that he tweeted about, and a lot of them about the flag, and then there's North Korea here and Little Rocket Man and all sorts of other things. And where is the one about Steph Curry? Excuse me, I should have had this ready to go here. Here it is. Donald J. Trump tweeted, going to the White House is considered a great honor for a championship team. Stephen Curry is hesitating, therefore invitation is withdrawn. That was a big part of the discussion of this weekend. So this is after Steph Curry had said on the jump on Friday, because the Warriors were going to have a meeting on Saturday morning to discuss as a team what they might do. I know Adam Silver said he was hoping the team would go to try and have a conversation. That all gets headed off at the pass, if you will, by the president and what he tweeted. So with that as the backdrop, and I just wanted to set it up with you having predicted months ago this was going to become an issue. What is your perspective on all that we saw happen this weekend between the president, the NBA, and the NFL?
So I want to make sure I set the table by saying, I'm not disrespecting the office of the presidency. I'm just going to talk about the behavior of the individual that's the 45th president, and I agree with you. It's actually 44 people that's held that office that sits in that chair. I knew that this would take place because when you run a divisive campaign the way he did, and on the way in here, I wanted to make sure I made a note of multiple people that he actually insulted along the way. The disabled. He mocked a reporter with a disability. Muslims, blacks, Asians, women, POWs, i.e. John McCain. He's not a hero. He got captured. Okay, whatever. His competitors came up with cute nicknames for everyone. Crooked Hillary, Lion Ted, Rocket Man, as you just mentioned. And I don't want to be a dotard here. You like that one, don't you? Mexicans. And so when you run a divisive campaign and you don't win the popular vote, yet you still hold the office of president, there will be people that have an adverse response to it. And so the unique thing about being an NBA player and or an NFL player, predominantly black sports for whatever it's worth, unlike NASCAR, who he tweeted about his appreciation for that, but we all know the dichotomy in that scenario. All of a sudden, you have NBA players saying, we don't want to stay at Trump-branded hotels. And again, I'm going to make sure I acknowledge, this isn't personal. I've actually gone to a boxing match with Tom Brady and Donald Trump in New Jersey, Antonio Tarver, Roy Jones Jr. I've stayed at Trump-branded hotels. I lived in Trump Tower when I played for the New York Knicks for 25 games. So this isn't personal in any way, shape, or form. But now when you fast forward that behavior, NBA players have a level of power and say, you know what? We're going to balk back at your behavior. And so instead of extending the invite because he knew it was going to get denied, he tried to reverse engineer the situation and say, you're uninvited. Well, you can't uninvite somebody that didn't want to come anyway. And we're going to continue to see this happen in the NBA, in the NFL, because those players in those sports have the power, they have the voice, they have the strength to show the public that sports can be a uniting factor, because they say if you don't want to offend people, don't talk about religion and or politics. Well, it's just the opposite in sports. This is a place where you could go to an arena. You could go to a stadium. There's a billionaire sitting there. There's the average working Joe, all rooting for the same squad. And so what he thought he was doing, dividing people through sports, he actually is going to unite. And all of those owners, are probably about 8 of them who are in the NFL, who were supporters of Trump, they have to be kicking themselves in the butt today. Because think about it. SOBs is what you call us, because we're trying to take our liberties and our choice to make a protest, a peaceful one at that, during the flag is just disrespectful, and it should be beneath the office of the president.
The part I didn't know fully, did the Golden State as a team say they weren't going to go, or was it just...
Again, they were having a meeting on... The plan was they were going to meet Saturday morning as their training camp opened and have a discussion about whether they were going to go or not.
Right.
Friday, Steph Curry went on The Jump.
Said he wasn't going to go.
He didn't say that. He said he was inclined at this point not to go. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it was something to the effect of... He was disinclined to go, but he was going to go to the meeting with an open mind. It was something to those lines. Now, Kevin Durant has made it very clear in comments multiple times that he didn't want any part of going prior to this. But they were, in theory, going to have a meeting on Saturday morning. Trump heard Steph Curry's comments and uninvited them before they had a chance to discuss whether they were going to go or not. I did see comments from the commissioner, from Adam Silver, saying that he personally is disappointed by this because he was hopeful that the team would go and hopefully be able to engage in some sort of discourse, God forbid, between people with opposing points of view, where someone like Steve Kerr, who has been a very vocal critic of the president, might go and say, look, this is what you are doing that is upsetting to us. Let me hear your perspective. I'm going to tell you mine. We'll sit down and have a conversation about it, rather than, oh, you're considering not coming here. All right, well, then you weren't invited in the first place. That's obviously not helping the situation.
No,
To backtrack back to your question, that's where it all began.
Because my thought on this has always been, if you want to go to the White House as a team win the championship, go. If you don't go. I don't care, personally. I think there are a lot of people that if they want to go because it's the office. You know, not necessarily the guy who's in it, but the office. They get to go through the White House. They get to see. I mean, you get to see the history of it and enjoy that part of it. So I don't know where you stand on that. I mean, if a team wants to go, and whether it's a basketball team and a couple players don't want to go, or it's a football team and 10 players don't want to go, I don't care. I'm not living my life off of, oh, my God, that guy didn't go to the White House. It's not making me think anything differently. I have my own views. If you don't want to go to the White House with your team, that's not changing my views. I'm going to the White House because I want to go see the White House. It doesn't matter if I want to see that guy in the White House or not. I want to go to the White House. I want to go and enjoy all that comes with the White House. And if people don't want to go, I don't care. It really doesn't bug me one bit.
Yeah, we differ there, and that's what makes this a great conversation, because I do care. And the reason why I care is because when you visit my house, that's an endorsement. And so once we take that picture, that's forever. It's almost like being a public figure. If somebody asks you to take a picture with them and they're doing something provocative, or they happen to be, say, naked, you're not going to take that picture. Why? You don't want that visual out there. And so for me, if I was a member of the Golden State Warriors or any championship team, I would not want that visual. I would not visit the White House under this president.
I think that it has changed. I agree with you. There were times in my life when I would have felt differently, but I do think that we are now at a point in our society, for better or worse, and I think probably for worse, where there is more attached to the simple act of going. Look at all the golfers who have played golf with the president, which has happened a million times, and no one pays any attention to it.
And they heard about it.
It does become a very big deal.
And they still golfed.
Some of them did, but some of them now are choosing not to, or some of them are saying they regret they have because of the backlash.
I personally don't think teams are going to boycott completely anymore.
Well, the Penguins are going. The
Penguins are going,
and the Warriors are not.
So let me give this.
Well, the Warriors
are uninvited.
Yeah,
I think they were going to not go anyway.
Throw that one out. Sans the uninvitings, that may go out there. I still think there will be players from teams that go, and I really don't have an issue.
Jalen.
I think that's important for me again to make this distinction. There will be teams that go.
Right.
They just won't be NBA and NFL teams. That's the distinction I'm making, and they just so happen to be the predominantly black sports. I think Major League Baseball clubs, I think those that celebrate NASCAR or whatever other sport you want to throw into the mix, they still will pick and choose their opportunities to go. Those are the two sports that I'm
You don't think any NFL? I see. We'll disagree on that. And listen, we'll find out.
Well, of course, the Patriots are going to go. They just gave them a championship ring 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, which was why I thought Robert Kraft's statement was unique, was important. Was significant is the word I'm looking for here, because there has been no more visit, with the exception of Woody Johnson, who was currently the ambassador to the United Kingdom. There has been no more visible supporter of President Trump amongst the NFL owners than Kraft. The other thing, just quickly on that, is we've seen political statements made in not going to the White House before. Matt Burke, NFL player, didn't go to the White House when President Obama was in office because of his support for abortion rights.
Sure, this has been done
Craig
before.
Hodges was involved one time.
Now it's more en masse.
And once Craig Hodges did that, he was ostracized from the league.
Blackballed from the league.
Oh, just like Colin Kaepernick.
Correct.
Right.
Tim Thomas of the Bruins didn't go. So there is historical precedent for lack of a better word, the politicizing of a visit to the White House. I think we are at a time right now, for many people, I certainly not for all people, for many people, where it has gone beyond just being the honor of being invited to the White House, which it was for you and me when we went there.
Yes, absolutely.
But it has now become a little. I do believe that right now, for a lot of people, it has become different.
No,
I
believe it has. I don't think it's going to be boycotted. We're going to agree to disagree that it will be boycotted by teams en masse. I'm going because I'm going to steal a pen.
Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
All right, there have been many times over 18 years where I've thought 4 hours in the morning was a lot of time to fill, and then there are days like today where it's just not nearly enough to get in all the conversation we would like to. Jalen Rose continues with us here, and Louis Riddick has joined us in our studio as well as we try and balance the things happening on the field with all of the bigger picture events that are taking place. And just to finish up the conversation we're having a few minutes ago about teams visiting and not visiting the White House, just through the things that have happened since Trump became president, Clemson went. The Patriots went. Quite a few players, including Tom Brady, did not go.
Right.
North Carolina, the basketball champions, just announced this weekend that they are not going. They say it was a scheduling conflict, not because of the president.
They said the same thing happened in 2005 when they gave like 8 or 9 dates and they couldn't work it out, so they didn't go in 2005 either.
The Warriors, I think we are safe to say, were likely not going to go, but they were meeting to discuss it for whatever that's worth. Steph Curry gave an interview to ESPN in which he said he was disinclined to go. The president saw that and disinvited them. So that just so we basically have the facts as we have them. And then where it goes from here remains to be seen. Jalen has had some really interesting thoughts on this. Mike and I certainly have all morning long. Louis, I'll give you the floor on wherever you want to go. You're a lifelong football man. You played football all through your life growing up and have been in and around the sport forever. We saw a day yesterday unlike any that we've ever seen before. What thoughts went through your mind?
Yeah, Greeny, I think I've said this a couple different times, and Golic, I heard you talk about it this morning. I heard Booger talk about it, and this is the thing that continues to strike me, and I've said this numerous different times. Right now, the whole conversation is centered around the form of protest that players are choosing to engage in, that Colin Kaepernick started. And the conversation continually, day after day after day, continues to veer away what the initial issue was. And it makes me think this. Look, I think every player in the National Football League who's kneeling right now, they weren't doing this a year ago, 2 years ago. Players in the National Football League understand the privilege that it is to live in this country, to play the sport that they do, to be able to take care of their families, and what it means to be an American. They understand that. There's a bigger issue that's involved here, though, right now. And I think what's troubling to me is that I think people purposely want to keep the conversation about the method of protest instead of about what the protest is supposed to be representing. And I think that's for one of two reasons in my mind. It's either because you don't care, because you don't think it affects you, or there's some other agenda that you've got going on. Either you think it's okay what's going on, what these guys are protesting about. Because otherwise you would be able to take your mind and advance it forward and say, hey, look, I don't agree with how you're protesting. I have family members in the military who have fought for the freedoms that we all benefit from, okay, who have been out there for a long time. If you cared about what the issues are that these guys really want to talk about, and I mean all of us want to talk about, and all of us are subject to, when you're talking about racial inequality and social injustices, if you really cared about that, you would go ahead and advance the conversation forward past the anthem protest and say, let's get at the crux of what the issue is here in America. But this has been something that's been going on for so long, Greeny. It went on for my mother. It went on for my grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. It's going on for us right now, and it's going on and it's going to go on for the foreseeable future. You know why? Because people don't want to talk about it. Because I don't think people, I think there's some people who don't know what to do. I think there's some people who don't care, and I think there's some people who like the way it is. And they're fine with it. Because you know what? What's good for me is what's good for me. That's what the world is like right now. If it's good for me and it doesn't affect me and I'm making my money and my life is good and my kids are taken care of, fine. Whatever you're dealing with, hey, you deal with. You deal with. This is not about the anthem for these players. The players are not trying to be disrespectful. They want to be heard, and they want to represent people who, right now, if it wasn't for the fact that the players were protesting, they'd never be heard, and things would stay the way that they are. And they've been this, and we know this, but we won't focus on what the issue really is. We will continue to, people will try to attack football players. Look, we know, we've been in locker rooms, man. There's people from all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions. And when they get out on the football field, what they showed you yesterday was this. And obviously we've seen this from team to team. Not everybody agrees with how to protest here, but these guys are tremendously loyal to one another. They're brothers in arms, so to speak, on the football field. And they showed that yesterday that, hey, look, we may not all agree, but we find a way to somehow continue to have dialogue internally and trying to come to some kind of conclusion about how we should protest. But this is much bigger than that, and that's the thing that irritates me the most, is that we can't even get to the problems.
Well,
we can't get to the problems, and I don't think people want to get to the problems.
I agree with you. And I said on a much, much, much smaller level, it's when Deflategate stopped being about the deflated football. It's when, and a bigger issue, it's when the Zeke Elliott stopped being about domestic violence and the procedure. We lose sight of what's going on. Let me ask you guys this. What if, instead of the tweets we heard from the president over the weekend, we saw this tweet instead? What will we think? Peaceful protests are a hallmark of our democracy. Even if I don't always agree, I recognize the rights of people to express their views. Sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, I know where you're going, and it's...
You know who tweeted that? Yeah. January 22nd of this year, Donald Trump.
Yeah, those were during the Women's March.
He tweeted that out. I mean, that encapsulates everything you want to hear. And then he goes to the SOB comments and the ridiculousness of this weekend.
I'd ask everyone this question. If all the players next week decided to stand up and not kneel during the national anthem, and then basically just said, okay, now what? What would people do? What would people say? Would everybody just go on back to business as usual, put their head down like ostriches, and be like, okay, well, that's all.
All good.
What
now.
would people do? Would everybody be happy then, or would the conversation advance?
So there are going to be a lot of people that talk into microphones today that probably don't give back to their community, probably aren't truly socially and politically conscious, and probably didn't vote. I personally didn't need Colin Kaepernick to take a knee. I personally didn't need for this situation to take place for me to understand how important this conversation that we're having right now. And the term protest keeps getting used a lot, but a lot of people don't make the distinction of what types of protests can be volatile versus peaceful. A direct action is a boycott or strike. The players aren't doing that. What they're doing is a passive protest. They're quietly taking a knee, and they're doing it when people are watching the most. And that just so happens to be at their place of business and or work, because if they did it in isolation, we wouldn't be talking about it. And also for all of the owners, and I'm going to name them, Robert Kraft, Jerry Jones, Stan Kroenke, Dan Snyder, Shahid Khan, Woody Johnson, Bob McNair, and Ed Glazier, they have their teams looking at them sideways today, because the guy you supported now not only turned his back on you, but he slapped us all in the face and even called us SOBs while doing it. So now it puts everybody in an awkward spot. And to your point about what he tweeted, I affectionately call 45 our commander in tweets. Yeah. We don't need somebody that's leading the free country, sending out tweets at 3 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, nicknaming and being divisive. We need leadership at a time when there's so many things happening in our country. And that's what's the more important thing, to your point, that isn't getting discussed.
Absolutely.
As well as the actions by Colin Kaepernick, who is somewhere right now, the leader of the scenario of taking the knee, without a job in the NFL because he did it. So there is a contradiction that's taking place, and if this doesn't happen, we don't have this conversation.
Leadership, huh? Leadership, credibility, competency, positive impact on others.
So there isn't any way in the world that we're going to take problems that date back in our country centuries and solve them in a 4-hour conversation. But if we could each of us, and Jalen, I'll give you the first word here, if we could each of us suggest something in a minute that you think might be a productive step towards addressing some of what we're seeing going on right now, what would it be? What would you like to see happen? Something that is realistic that you would like to see happen as a result of all this.
I would like those who are uncomfortable by the conversation to actually take a deep breath, open their ears, open their heart, and step out of their comfort zone and truly listen to what people are talking about, protesting about, upset about, disappointed about. And also pay attention to the audience that our president continues to endorse. He was in Huntsville, Alabama. And while we're talking about what he said, we should be talking about those that were cheering and clapping what he said. That's what the issue is. Those that continue to retweet and support some of the divisive rhetoric that continues to be spewed. Once we respect one another and acknowledge that there's an issue, that allows us to put each other in a position to get past it. But to turn a blind eye and ignore it is the frustrating part, I'm pretty sure, for everybody involved, in particular those who are protesting.
Quite honestly, Jalen, I think there's some people who they're never going to change their mind, okay? Because this stuff is taught. It is handed down from generation to generation, and you're never going to change that. You just aren't. What can you do when you're talking about social injustices, when you're talking about unfair treatment of minorities, when it comes to, minorities being treated differently at traffic stops, law enforcement not being held accountable for not following the letter of the law, those kinds of things that need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, making sure you're holding people accountable. Those are the kind of things that need to be advanced. Those are the kind of things that need to start changing, and people start needing to see more things happen in such a way that people are being treated fairly. Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. Like, how can we make sure that those kinds of things start to slow down as far as how people are treated differently? Because when you're talking about people opening their minds and having conversations, look, I mean, that sounds great, and I'm with you. But in my opinion, I don't think sometimes I don't think that's ever going to change.
And I think there are a number of people that won't ever. So
that's
those
right.
aren't the ones that we're dealing with.
Right.
We're dealing with the ones, and I agree with you, Jalen, where I look at that and I say, man, I hate what they're doing. Deep breath, count to 10, whatever, and say, but let me listen. I may still not agree,
sure,
but let me listen. Let me ask you both this quick since we're running out of time. I asked this to Booger. If Colin Kaepernick was on a team this year, and remember he said if he's playing, he wasn't going to kneel anymore. He was standing for the national anthem. If he was on a team this year and he stood for that first national anthem, do you think players would still be kneeling and sitting, as many that are now? Or once they saw him standing, do you think that they would stand as well?
I think players would still kneel because you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. And while he was the initial person to set it off, I still think that there will be players doing it regardless of whether he chose to participate or not.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with him.
Do you think some would stop doing it because he would stand?
You know what? I think right now there may be some who stop doing it because I think, Mike, that there are people now who feel as though, look, the conversation is out there now. Right. Now we've kind of really got the ball rolling. Right. People are listening now. But it would be interesting to see. I think some players, look, I mean, not all players are kneeling. Right. Not all. I mean, it's funny because, again, I really do think, though, that we need to get past this issue about the form of protest. And I think players really want to. I know I want to. I think if you really care about what's going on and what is at the crux of this issue, you'll stop talking about the methodology, the form of protest, and you'll start talking about the issues. And you'll start talking about how can we make it better? How can we make equality be the norm instead of inequality that the people are talking about right now?
And with the reaction that the owners, inclusive of most of those who contributed to Donald Trump's campaign, and Jalen read the names earlier this morning, with their reactions, does this in any way change your perspective as to whether or not Colin Kaepernick will ever get back into the NFL?
Look, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for him. I think that there's going to be people who, no matter what, will look at this and will try and make a business decision. Even if they have been swayed a little bit differently, even if they're looking at this thing a little bit differently, even if they're going, hey, maybe we made a little bit of a mistake here, and we'd like to try and walk it back. I really think at the end of the day, business is what's going to rule, and I think Colin's going to sit. I think the likelihood of Colin sitting is much more than him getting a job.
Serious conversation today, but I want to end it on a light note. Jalen Rose has said, and he's made the prediction, that LeBron James will finish his career in Cleveland. Way to go, Jalen. That's what I got.
Really good guy, huh?
Guys, thank you both for being a part of this. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution all morning long. We'll see you tomorrow. Mike and Mike.